Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Wednesday, May 1st, May Day. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Asa Winstanley, Jon Elmer, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 208 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. We have another packed show for you today, including a complete and thorough debunking of yet another mass rapes hoax. Later on in the program, of course, Jon Elmer will take a look at videos from the resistance in Gaza and Lebanon, along with the Yemenis downing of another U.S. Reaper drone. We'll also have a full news roundup. After our first guest, we are delighted to be joined by Donya Abu Sitta. She is a contributor to the Electronic Intifada, and she joins us live from Gaza. Donya, are you there?
Unfortunately, I think the connection just dropped.
Oh, that's...
We had Donya on just before we went live, and we were hoping the connection would stay up long enough for us to be able to talk to her.
All right. Well, we'll try to get her back after the news. So I'll just go to the news. Israeli airstrikes and shelling have continued across the Gaza Strip. In the north, Israel targeted residential blocks in Jabalia, Gaza City, and Beit Lahia. On Friday, Israel murdered the daughter, grandson, and son-in-law of 𝐓𝐴𝐻𝐿 𝐈𝐴𝐻𝐿, the beloved writer, poet, educator, and our de facto Gaza editor, who was assassinated by Israel in December. Our colleague Ali Abunimah writes that, quote, the airstrike on a building in the Al Rimal neighborhood of Gaza City killed Shaima 𝐓𝐴𝐻𝐿 𝐈𝐴𝐻𝐿, her husband Mohammed Abdelaziz Siam, and their 3-month-old son Abdelrahman. They had been sheltering in the building of Global Communities, an international relief charity formerly known as CHF in Gaza City, according to Mohammed's brother. The killing of 𝐓𝐴𝐻's daughter Shaima and the grandson he never had a chance to meet is being received with renewed outrage and grief from 𝐓𝐴𝐻's close friends, former students, and people all around the world who have been touched by 𝐓𝐴𝐻's life and work. In an interview with Al Jazeera some years ago, 𝐓𝐴𝐻 described how Shaima, then just 5 years old, inspired him to start telling stories during Israel's first major war on Gaza in December 2008 to January 2009. Shaima was a talented calligrapher who cherished her father's memory and what he meant to people all over the world. For more, read both Ali Abunimah's post and our contributor Hen Ghazi Al-Farah's article, 𝐓𝐴𝐻𝐿 𝐈𝐴𝐻𝐿 was special, so was his daughter, on electronicintifada.net. In central Gaza over the last few days, Israeli forces have continued to strike Deir Balah and Nuseirat refugee camp. Our contributor Abu Bakr Abed took this photo of Deir Balah on Tuesday, saying that an Israeli jet bombed a home very close to his house. He added that amongst the casualties was one child. And just in the last few minutes, Abu Bakr sent us this update. The Al-Zuwaida area north of Deir Balah is being repeatedly targeted as a huge, terrifying missile has just now hit a residential building. Warplanes continue to closely hover above the area. Drones are continuing to buzz. Ambulances, sirens, the normal tone in Gaza are back again for casualties, he said. Israel also continued to target areas in and around the southern city of Rafah relentlessly, as Israeli officials ramp up threats of a ground invasion. Dozens of Palestinians in Rafah have been killed over the past few days in multiple bombings of apartment blocks and homes. On Tuesday, Israel struck tents of displaced people in Rafah with incendiary weapons. Meanwhile, Israel is reportedly setting up a complex system of checkpoints that will prevent men, quote, of military age from fleeing Rafah in preparation for its offensive on the southern Gaza border city, according to a report published on Tuesday in Middle East Eye, citing an unnamed senior Western official. According to the report, quote, the checkpoints are designed to allow some women and children to leave Rafah ahead of an expected Israeli offensive, but unarmed civilian Palestinian men will likely be separated from their families and remain trapped in Rafah during the assault. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced on Tuesday that the Israeli army will move ahead with a ground invasion into Rafah, quote, whether or not there is a ceasefire deal that would include a prisoner swap. The extremist National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who had reportedly warned Netanyahu that if the Rafah invasion did not happen, it would mean the dissolution of the prime minister's government, said on Tuesday that he was pleased with Netanyahu's statement and said he had, quote, warned the prime minister of the consequences if, God forbid, Israel does not enter Rafah, if, God forbid, we end the war, if, God forbid, there will be a reckless deal. The prime minister heard my words, Itamar Ben-Gvir said, promised that Israel would go into Rafah, promised that the war would not end, and promised that there would be no reckless deal. I welcome these things. I think the prime minister understands very well what it will mean if these things do not take place, he added. Ben-Gvir's colleague, Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, called for the, quote, total annihilation of Gaza on Tuesday, adding that Israel's war cabinet should not agree to any political concessions in any ceasefire negotiation. Addressing Netanyahu, Smotrich said, quote, don't wave a white flag, don't let Yahya Sinwar humiliate us again and win the war. A government that submits to international pressure and stops the war in the middle will, at that moment, lose its right to exist. Palestinian human rights organizations have stated that an attack on Rafah, which is where half the population of the Gaza Strip has already fled, would be catastrophic. Al-Haq, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, and Al-Mizan stated last week that, quote, our organizations warn of the threat of an Israeli ground invasion on Rafah. Such an attack would represent the peak of the Israeli attack on Gaza, with the intent of inflicting the highest number of casualties and civilian victims, potentially leading to mass forcible displacement toward the Egyptian borders, located mere meters away. This scenario threatens the acceleration of the Nakba on the Palestinian people and is an approaching reality. The United Nations stated that across Gaza, there are more than 37 million tons of debris and rubble, and that much of it also contains unexploded ordnance. The United Nations Mine Action Service reported that it could take up to 14 years to clear all the explosive threats once the war is over. And according to the Palestinian Civil Defense in Gaza, an estimated 10,000 bodies are decomposing under the rubble. In a press release published on Tuesday, Gaza's civil defense warned that the decomposing bodies will likely increase the threat of diseases, especially as the summer temperatures rise. Pressure on international agencies such as the UN is needed, the civil defense added, to, quote, allow the entry of heavy equipment necessary to enable our crews to save the lives of those wounded by the ongoing Israeli bombing, as well as to extract the bodies of the martyrs that are decomposing under the rubble and are causing a health disaster for the population. The U.S. military began construction of a pier off the coast of northern Gaza this week in coordination with the Israelis and USAID, the State Department's development agency. 1,000 U.S. soldiers and sailors will be involved in the pier project, military officials said. Meanwhile, Israel refuses to allow thousands of aid trucks to enter and distribute food, medicine, and supplies inside Gaza through the various land routes. Jon Elmer, of course, will have much more on this story later on in the program. In the occupied West Bank, hundreds of students at Birzeit University near Ramallah expelled the German ambassador to the Palestinian Authority on Tuesday and forced him to leave the campus. The ambassador was visiting the on-campus Palestine Museum to attend a conference with international representatives, but learning of his presence and as Germany remains a major supporter of Israel's genocide in Gaza, students kicked him out. Germany remains the second largest exporter of weapons to Israel behind the U.S. Also on Tuesday in Ramallah, protesters held a demonstration outside of the office of Canada's representative to the Palestinian Authority over Canada's role in supporting Israel's genocide. Palestinian Authority security services and police shoved and beat protesters. Here's a clip of that demonstration, with protesters chanting, "Oh, Palestinian Authority, what's wrong with you? I don't know what happened to you. You're arresting those with honor while the spies are in your midst." Defense for Children International Palestine reported this week that Israeli forces are holding 61 Palestinian children in administrative detention. The rights group states that, quote, "This is a record number since DCIP began monitoring child administrative detainees in 2008. At least half of these children were detained after October 7th, as Israeli forces escalated military operations throughout the West Bank." Ayed Abu Aktesh, Accountability Program Director at Defense for Children International Palestine, stated, quote, "Since October 7th, Israeli forces have accelerated their arrest campaigns against Palestinian children and detained a record number of children without charge." The rights group says that about 1 in 3 Palestinian child detainees are held under administrative detention orders, according to the Israel Prison Service. At the end of March, Israeli forces were detaining 194 Palestinian children. The rise in the number of Palestinian children subjected to administrative detention coincides with the alarming conditions faced by Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons, Defense for Children International Palestine adds. The situation of Palestinian prisoners has become increasingly worse, with children reporting very harsh conditions since October 7th. Administrative detention is a form of imprisonment without charge or trial, regularly used by Israeli authorities to detain Palestinians, including children. Palestinian children held under administrative detention orders are not presented with charges, and their detention is based on secret evidence that is neither disclosed to the child nor their attorney, preventing them from preparing a legal challenge to the detention and its alleged basis, according to documentation collected by Defense for Children International Palestine. Our colleague Maureen Murphy reports that, quote, "Israel's decades of impunity are over, or so its leaders fear, and are leaking reports to the media that war crimes arrest warrants are imminent in an effort to get its allies to thwart them." Maureen writes that those leaked rumors that members of Israel's war cabinet, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and the military chief 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿 will soon be indicted at the International Criminal Court may very well be credible. Reuters reported on Monday that staff at Gaza hospitals, which over the past several months have been stripped of their ability to provide care and transformed into mass graves, were interviewed by International Criminal Court investigators. It is possible that arrest warrants against senior Israeli officials have already been issued in confidentiality, Maureen writes. She adds that, quote, "Informing Israel's panic over the ICC is the fact that it can only maintain its regime of settler colonization, apartheid, and occupation in Palestine with the support of the world's sole superpower. But that support is eroding due to widespread disgust toward Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza. Decades of bipartisan support for Israel is viewed by many as a strategic liability from which the U.S. gains little benefit, increasingly so as a desperate Netanyahu attempts to drag Washington into a catastrophic regional war. The Biden administration's hands-on role in Israel's genocide in Gaza is a legal liability as well. ICC arrest warrants for Israeli war crimes could and should implicate U.S. officials, Maureen writes. For much more, read Maureen Claire Murphy's report, U.S. Implicated as Israeli Impunity Nears Its End, on electronicintifada.net. In another development at The Hague, the World Court on Tuesday ruled against issuing provisional measures against Germany over charges brought by Nicaragua that Germany's arms sales are aiding and abetting Israel's genocide in Gaza. In a post published earlier today, Maureen Claire Murphy writes that though the World Court declined to issue the emergency measures, it did not dismiss Nicaragua's case against Germany. The court reminded states of their obligations in relation to the transfer of arms, where there is a risk that weapons might be used to violate international law. The judges stated that, quote, all these obligations are incumbent upon Germany as a state party in its supply of arms to Israel. For much more, read Maureen Claire Murphy's post, World Court Rejects Ban on German Weapons Exports to Israel on electronicintifada.net. On Tuesday, Code Pink's Medea Benjamin disrupted Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin during a House meeting. She said, quote, I couldn't just listen to him talk about U.S. leadership while the whole world is watching U.S. complicity in the genocide occurring in Gaza. Here is that video.
For our partners in Congress who help.
How can you talk about U.S. leadership when we're supporting genocide in Gaza?
Committee will come to order.
It is illegal, it is immoral, it is disgusting. The whole world is watching what we are doing in Gaza right now. Secretary General, you are supporting a genocide. Stop supporting genocide. Free Palestine. Yeah. So I spoke out at the hearing where General Austin was talking about U.S. leadership. And I said, how can you talk about U.S. leadership when the U.S. is supporting genocide and the whole world is watching as the U.S. is sending weapons that violate U.S. laws, violate international laws, violate world opinion, violate basic decency and morality. We have to speak out. And I'm wearing a t-shirt that says, another Jew that speaks out against genocide.
You need to stay back and not interfere with it.
Going to search her again?
She will be searched again before she gets in the way.
What is in there? What is a harm to everyone? Are all these Congress people who just voted for $70 billion more for going to Israel? Every one of them has blood on their hands. Those are the ones that should be arrested. I am proud to have stood up. We are all doing what we can. We must stop our government, even if it means going to jail for justice.
You're arresting the wrong person.
Hey, ma'am.
That was Medea Benjamin of Code Pink being arrested after disrupting Lloyd Austin's address to the House. And finally, last night in New York City, throngs of police, including riot cops in a SWAT truck, stormed the campus of Columbia University and began violently arresting student protesters who have been holding an encampment for 2 weeks to demand that the university divest from companies that profit from Israel's genocide. Cops also violently arrested and beat students at the nearby City College of New York. More than 100 campuses around the country have begun their own encampments to demand an end to their university's complicity in Israel's crimes. On Monday night, Columbia students took over Hamilton Hall, which they renamed after Hind Rajab, the 6-year-old girl who was killed by Israeli soldiers at the end of January in Gaza City. Hind was the sole survivor of a massacre of her family, who were all killed in their car as they attempted to evacuate their neighborhood. But nearly 2 weeks later, the little girl's body was found alongside those of her relatives in the car, as well as the bodies of the 2 paramedics who were found in the ambulance that had come to her assistance. Journalist Lama El-Arian filmed NYPD breaking into the Hind Hall building last night and forcing protesters out to be arrested. Reporter Talia Jane filmed the NYPD making arrests at the gates of Columbia University, quote, as students, faculty, and staff attempted to protect the university. NYPD is using floodlights on the campus, hindering visibility, Talia Jane tweeted.
You will be placed under arrest and charged with disorderly conduct. You are unlawfully obstructing traffic. You are ordered to disperse now in the same form of pedestrian traffic. If you do so voluntarily, no charges will be placed against you. If you refuse to disperse, you will be placed under arrest and charged with disorder.
That was from reporter Talia Jane. This morning, Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine stated that multiple students were taken straight to the hospital due to severe injuries by NYPD, and students had swollen faces from being kicked repeatedly by police. The Columbia University student-run radio station, WKCR, reported that the administration asked the New York Police Department not just to come and violently arrest the students, but also to remain on campus until mid-May, which is after graduation. At UCLA, overnight, student activists say that police, not surprisingly, stood by as a pro-genocide lynch mob attacked the student encampment, assaulted students, set off fireworks, and sprayed mace into students' tents. We'll continue reporting on the situation at Columbia, at UCLA, and on campuses across the U.S. and around the world as students, activists, and communities rise up against this genocide and fight state repression that is designed to silence these uprisings. And you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. Coming up, we'll have a full debunking with Ali on the latest mass rapes hoax. We'll also have an update from Jon Elmer on the resistance in Gaza and Lebanon. But first, I think we have Donya with us now, live from Gaza. Let's see if this works. Hi, Donya. Oh, let's see if we can.
Donya is muted, but she's
Donya, are you there? Oh, we still can't hear her.
Donya, unfortunately the sound isn't coming through, but we're so happy to see you. And I want all our viewers to know that Donya Abu Sitta, along with her sister Lubna, her brother Hassan, and her other sister Jana, are among our wonderful writers in Gaza. And we're very proud to publish all their work. You've read some of Donya's fantastic articles, the recent one she did, which is about the collapse of education in Gaza. You can see some of her work there. I don't know if we're going to be able to fix the audio. Donya, can you hear us? Wave if you can hear us. Yeah, Donya can hear us, but we can't hear her, which is just so absolutely frustrating. Yeah, we had the sound working briefly, but this is the problem of connecting to Gaza. We never know if it's going to work or for how long. But Donya, we would love to hear your voice, but instead, because we can't hear your voice now, I want you to know, on behalf of all of the 2,000 people who are watching this live and the tens of thousands of people who will watch this video afterwards, how much we appreciate the work that you do, that your brother and your sisters do, and that all the writers in Gaza do too. And we send our love and solidarity to you.
Oh, it's so frustrating. We have to figure out how to fix these these connections. But hopefully we can get Donya back, or we'll keep trying, Donya.
We're going to keep trying to get you back, Donya. We're not going to give up, but we can't hear you, unfortunately.
Oh, that's too bad.
But we will. We know that you can hear us, and so I wanted you to hear that message on behalf of all of us here. We love you. We support you. And we will get you back. We will try again until we can get you back. If it doesn't work today, it will be another day, but we will get you back on the show.
Thank you so much, Donya. Okay. I was so looking forward to hearing.
Yeah, me too. And we did, just so people know, we did connect with Donya earlier. We were able to get the sound to work. It took a while, and we went through all the troubleshooting, and that's just the way it is. So we're gonna get her back, and we're very proud to work with Donya and her family. And you can read their work at the Electronic Intifada in the meantime.
Absolutely. Okay, I am Nora Barrows-Friedman. I'm here with Ali Abunimah. I want to let you know that this next segment contains frank discussions of alleged sexual violence. Last week, billionaire former Facebook executive Sheryl Sandberg released a film purporting to document mass rapes carried out by Hamas fighters on October 7th. The film, called Screams Before Silence, has been heavily promoted by such figures as former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, ostensibly progressive Congressman Ro Khanna, and of course the Israeli government, among many others. Writing in the Washington Post on April 29th, columnist Ruth Marcus urged her readers, quote, "You should watch it and speak out about how rape and gender violence were deployed as weapons of war, about breasts cut from bodies, about nails driven into a woman's vagina. It has become the latest vehicle to push Israel's claims of mass rape on October 7th, claims that Israel supporters continue to use to either distract from or justify Israel's ongoing US-armed genocide in Gaza." Since its release, it has garnered almost 600,000 views on YouTube alone. We're going to take a detailed look at the film now, and Ali is going to show us how it is full of fabrications, distortions, and lies, and does not, in fact, present any new credible evidence to support Israel's claims. Ali, let's start by reminding viewers about the role Sheryl Sandberg has played in pushing this story prior to the release of the film.
Thanks, Nora. Yeah, Sheryl Sandberg has indeed been pushing this story since soon after October 7th. And regular viewers may remember that we encountered Sandberg back in February when she and Hillary Clinton headlined a seminar at none other than Columbia University to promote the mass rape hoax. Sandberg chaired a panel featuring Jeffrey Gettleman, the lead author of the notorious and now almost completely debunked New York Times article from December called Screams Without Words. I don't think that it's a coincidence that the title of Sandberg's film, Screams Before Silence, echoes the headline of that New York Times article. Let's take a look at Sheryl Sandberg introducing Jeffrey Gettleman at that Columbia University event back in February.
Gettleman is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, foreign correspondent for the New York Times. For the past 20 years, he has covered every major conflict in more than 80 countries. Every so often, I get to talk to him in these places, and I can't believe what he's going through. His piece in December, called Screams Without Words, is the definitive piece on the sexual violence of October 7th. Incredibly hard to research, and we'll have a chance to talk about that.
As you just heard there, Sandberg praises the article Gettleman wrote with two Israeli co-authors as, quote, the definitive piece on the sexual violence of October 7th. But that's not the only praise she gives it. Here's another brief clip.
Back to you. So the recent piece you just wrote, Screamed Without Words, builds on all the work you've done over the decades and is incredibly comprehensive. I think you spoke to over 100 people for the piece.
Now, as I said, that was back on February 9th. And recall that by that point, much of Gettleman's piece had already been debunked. For example, we had addressed it here on this live stream right at the beginning of January. I'll just mention right now that a lot of the rape claims that are in Gettleman's story do not appear in the Sandberg film. And I'm going to come back and talk about that later.
Okay, let's talk about Sandberg's film, Screams Before Silence. Give us an overview. I watched it yesterday. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, we watched it. I actually watched it several times so that nobody else has to. But yeah, let's look at this claim that's right at the beginning of the film. And this is a screenshot from the film, and it says, eyewitnesses and investigators have reported that Hamas subjected women to sexual violence and rape before they were killed. Those who were taken hostage suffered and continue to suffer physical, mental, and sexual abuse at the hands of Hamas terrorists. Now, there's a couple of things to note here. First, with respect to what supposedly happened on October 7th, the film speaks only of eyewitnesses and investigators, but not living victims. 7 months after this event, they have still not identified a single survivor. The second thing to note is that the film does not claim that there were merely some isolated and individualized incidents of rape. It insists, and this point is hammered throughout the film, that there was a pre-planned campaign of mass rape ordered by the leadership of Hamas. This is important to keep in mind. Just like previous efforts to promote this narrative, this film does not provide credible evidence of even one rape, let alone mass rapes on October 7th. The film does not identify a single victim of the alleged mass rapes on October 7th, either living or dead. They do claim, as we shall see, that there were dozens of women who were raped and killed, but they can't put a name or a photo to any of them. There are also no interviews with, say, family members of a rape victim, living or dead. They keep telling us to believe Israeli women, but once again, there are no Israeli women we are being invited to believe as victims, except for one, and she is not the victim of an alleged rape on October 7th.
And who is that?
So the only person they produce as a victim of an alleged sexual assault is a woman called 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿. And starting in late March, her story was heavily promoted by the New York Times and the Israeli government's propaganda apparatus. Here's a short clip of her in the Sandberg film describing how she was captured and taken to Gaza.
10 men around me. And my instinct was just to fight, to do what I can.
Later in the film, Susanna describes a pretty harrowing experience, the one she told the New York Times about in March. As I said, she does not claim that she was sexually attacked on October 7th. She claims that while she was being held in Gaza for 55 days, one of her guards, whose name she gives as Muhammad, forced her on one occasion to perform an unspecified sexual act. But Susanna only publicly revealed this account months after her return from Gaza and in the context of a highly coordinated campaign involving the New York Times and the Israeli government. So, for example, when Susanna first spoke to the media back in January about her experience in Gaza, she never mentioned the alleged sexual assault. And her story was rolled out at the same time that the New York Times and other Western media were largely ignoring credible first-hand accounts of sexual violence against Palestinians by Israeli soldiers. So this one story got huge publicity while the testimonies of Palestinian women and men about sexual violence against them were just ignored. Now, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Susanna does not claim that there are any witnesses to what she says she experienced in Gaza, so it's really impossible to verify or completely discount her claim. But the key point is that even if we take her account to be entirely true, it does not in any way support the main thesis of the film. Susanna describes one individual taking advantage of his power over her in an isolated situation and on one single occasion. Nothing in her account, again, if we accept it as completely true, supports the claim that there was a pre-planned campaign of mass rape on October 7th, or even that there is such a campaign against the female Israeli soldiers who are still in Gaza after the civilian women were released in November. From the perspective of Sandberg and other Israeli propagandists, focusing on 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Susanna is, however, understandable because they do not have any other victim, not even one, from October 7th itself.
In the film, Sheryl Sandberg shows clips of various captured, supposedly Palestinian fighters confessing to rapes. But what can you tell us about that?
Well, again, in the absence of any identifiable victims, the Sandberg film includes footage supplied by Israel of supposed confessions by captured Palestinians, interrogated and almost certainly tortured by Israel. Torture by Israel is, of course, well documented, pervasive, and routine, and has dramatically increased since October 7th. The methods routinely used include inflicting physical and psychological torture and explicitly threatening to murder or rape relatives of a detainee if they do not provide the statements Israel demands. We have to be clear that confessions obtained or suspected to have been obtained under torture can never be considered credible evidence. And not even the New York Times and other Western publications that are always so eager to launder Israel's lies have cited them as evidence. You'll recall also that a few weeks ago we talked about the report written by Pramila Patten, the UN Secretary General's special advisor on sexual violence in conflict. And in an article for the Electronic Intifada, our colleague Asa Winstanley and I heavily criticized that report for its strong pro-Israel bias. But even that report was not willing to launder torture confessions. The Patten report actually states that the UN team did not consider accounts collected by Israeli intelligence bodies through, quote, interrogations of alleged perpetrators, despite some being offered, due to the mission team's inability in the time allotted to establish the due process rights of the accused persons and adequate authentication, end quote. Also, the human rights group Physicians for Human Rights Israel, which has unfortunately given undue credence to Israel's mass rape claims, has also warned that the so-called confessions were obtained by interrogations that included the use of torture, and thus it does not consider them valid. And even the Israeli police have had to admit that they could not match these so-called confessions with any victims. So this alone should discredit the entire film, but instead we see so-called progressives, as you said, people like Rouhana, and of course self-proclaimed champions of women's rights and human rights like Hillary Clinton, heavily promoting a film that shows prisoners who are tortured making confessions.
So, Ali, if there's no credible confessions and no firsthand accounts from alleged victims of rapes on October 7th, how does the film try and convince viewers that this is what happened?
Well, a lot of it is atmospherics. If you watch it, you'll see there's a lot of sort of doom and gloom music and Sheryl Sandberg crying and hugging people, and people talking about terrible things that they experienced or witnessed on October 7th, none of which are rapes. But when it comes to the rapes, one tactic is just to assert that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence without actually showing any of it. So let's take a look at this clip of Israeli Police Superintendent Mirit Ben-Mayor talking to Sandberg.
And with clear instructions to kidnap as many, to rape as many, to humiliate as many, to murder as many. They came here with a mission, and they succeeded in the mission.
How much evidence is there of the crimes of October 7th?
There's a lot of evidence. We have over 200,000 visuals that we've collected. We have over 2,000 testimonies that have been taken. Among these evidence, we have substantial evidence for sexual violence that took place on the 7th of October.
So that might sound pretty convincing to an uninformed audience, but as we've said before on this live stream, Israel has never claimed and is still not claiming that there is a single piece of video that shows a rape taking place. And that is an extraordinary absence given the fact that you just heard once again that this was a systematic campaign of mass rape. But you do not have to take my word for it. Here's what the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported as recently as April 18th in an article that is actually trying to boost, not debunk, the mass rape claims. And I quote from Haaretz, it says, "From inquiries put to 3 bodies in the defense establishment by Haaretz, it emerges that the intelligence material collected by the police and the intelligence bodies, including footage from terrorists' body cameras, does not contain visual documentation of any acts of rape themselves. End quote. So here's another example of a claim that there is just a ton of evidence where none exists. This is a woman called Shari Mendez, who is described as an Israeli army reservist who was at the Shura military base that was being used as a makeshift morgue on October 7th.
The Shura base, which is where all the victims of the October 7th massacre were brought, there were body bags lining the corridors from the floor to the ceiling on both sides. And we never knew what we would see. We never knew what the level of the atrocity would be inside the body bag. As we did more and more of what we were tasked to do, we realized that women were not just murdered. Women were shot in the head so many times that it seemed like there was an intention, an objective, to obliterate their faces. Most often, families couldn't be shown the faces of their daughters. And we began to see that some of it was sexual in nature, directly targeted sexual violence. Some came in with no clothing and mostly very bloody underwear.
Did this feel systematic to you?
Yes, it did seem systematic to use sexual violence as a weapon of war.
So now let's go back to that April 18th article in Haaretz, and here's what it says, quote, "At the Shura base, to which most of the bodies were taken for purposes of identification, there were 5 forensic pathologists at work. In that capacity, they also examined bodies that arrived completely or partially naked in order to examine the possibility of rape. According to a source knowledgeable about the details, there were no signs on any of those bodies attesting to sexual relations having taken place or of mutilation of genitalia." End quote. The article also says that there were police forensic teams at the Shura base, and then it says, quote, "These teams did not document a single case of sexual assault or cases of genital mutilation," end quote. And let's also go back to the UN report, which says that the UN team examined thousands of photos and video clips provided by the Israelis. The UN report says, quote, "In the medico-legal assessment of available photos and videos, no tangible indications of rape could be identified," end quote. So Shari Mendez is just a liar.
And there's no forensic evidence either. What are some of the other tactics that the film uses to try and convince viewers that we're dealing with something real here, besides the moody music and the close-up shots of Sheryl Sandberg patting the backs of people?
There is a huge emphasis on trying to shock viewers with claims that witnesses observed mutilated bodies with signs of sexual violence, including the insertion of objects such as iron bars and nails into the genitalia and around the groins of victims. Another horrific claim is that bodies were found in positions that indicated that victims had been raped, for example, with their legs spread apart. I want to emphasize that absolutely none of these claims are being made based on proper forensic examinations or by qualified experts. So let's look at a few clips from the film. And again, I have to warn that the things being described are pretty explicit and horrible. Let's take a look at this first clip.
Cut to pieces. Cut to pieces. You cannot identify if it's a man or woman. Everything was ripped.
ראיתי גופות שרופות, גם של גברים, גם של בנות.
כשאתה רואה אדם, גבר או אישה, שהגופה השרופה שלו היא בתנועת התכווצות, בתנועת התגוננות, אתה מבין שקודם שרפו ואחר כך הם מתו.
A lot of the bodies were naked, totally.
In your experience, how often have you found naked bodies?
Never. Never.
When I got out, I saw so many bodies. Their shirts were ripped off, and girls without skirts, without pants, their legs were spreaded. They were abused. The bodies were abused.
מה שראיתי שם זה דברים שלא אנושיים. אם זה גופות של בחורות שהבגדים שלהם קרועים, באיזושהי פוזיציה, את יודעת, שהיא שוכבת על הגב ורגליים פתוחות. היה גם איזה אחת שאת רואה ממש על פגה של אוטו, מכופפת עם מכנס למטה. אתה רואה גופה של בחורה עם בגדים קרועים ועם איברים כרותים כאילו. אז אתה אומר לעצמך, מה, גם אנסו אותה וגם שחטו אותה וגם ביטרו אותה, מה עוד יכולים לעשות לבן אדם כאילו?
Yeah, so the people we just saw in that clip, in order of first appearance, was 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 of Zaka, a Jewish group that recovers bodies for burial, and we'll come back to them later. He is followed by Elad Avraham, who worked as a security guard at the Supernova rave, that famous rave a few miles from Gaza, and then 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜, also of Zaka, and finally Tali Binner, a woman who survived the Supernova rave. And these are really horrific claims. And for those who are listening and couldn't read the subtitles in the Hebrew section, the account in Hebrew was similar to what you heard in English. It was talking about burned, mutilated bodies, and that kind of thing that the person assumes indicates rapes. But again, this person is not an expert. Now, let's watch a bit more of 𝐓𝐶 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 from Zaka.
When we picked up the mattress, we found her body. This woman, we could not identify her from her face. She was naked wholly. And she had nails around her female organs.
It's quite a claim.
Yeah. And then now there's more, unfortunately. This is a clip of 𝐓𝐶 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 again and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 of Zaka showing photos to Sheryl Sandberg that they claim show evidence of some of the horrors they just described. Let's look at that.
Okay, I'd like to see some of what you saw.
אנחנו רואים כאן בתמונה אישה שקרעו לה את המכנסיים, ירו בה במפסעה.
As you can see, the body was brutal in different stages. This is a part of the breast.
זו אישה שירו לה כאן, זאת אישה שירו לה כאן.
Over here, and over here, and over here.
Oh my God.
Of course, we don't see those photos ourselves.
That's right. That's right. And it continues for that a little bit longer, but it's more of the same. And again, 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜, who's speaking in Hebrew, he's talking about, things inserted around the groin area. But as you say, at no point do we see those photos that they're showing to Sheryl Sandberg ourselves. And then finally, this is a clip of a man called Rami Davidian, who claims to have single-handedly rescued hundreds of people from that supernova rave on October 7th.
ראיתי בחורות קשורות עם הידיים כפות. מישהו רצח אותם, אנס אותם, תעלל בהם, פה בעצים האלה. הרגליים שלהם היו פתוחות. מי שרואה זה יודע שהתעללו בבנות. מישהו הפשיט אותם, מישהו אנס אותם. החדירו לעברים הפנימיים שלהם כל מיני דברים, כמו קרשים, כמו ברזלים. מעל 30 בנות נרצחו ונאנסו פה. הייתי צריך לסגור את הרגליים שלהם, לכסות את הגופות שלהם, שאף אחד לא יראה מה שאני ראיתי. אף אחד. אף אחד לא יכול לראות דברים כאלה.
It's okay.
I don't even know what to say about that.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, just to summarize for those who are
Yeah.
listening and couldn't read the subtitles. So Rami Davidian, they're standing in the forest where this supernova rave took place, and he claims that he saw women tied to trees, who had been raped, who had been burned, who had had objects like iron rods and wooden boards inserted into their private parts. And then he says that, I mean, no one else was around, according to him. It was just him. And then he says what he did is that if their legs, again, I'm sorry about how graphic this is, but if their legs were spread, he closed their legs, he covered everything up, and he said, so no one else could see. So no one else could see. So what's interesting about that is if we are to believe what he's saying, then he is admitting that he actually tampered with a major crime scene in order to destroy the evidence of the things he says he saw, so that no one else could ever see them. And that turns out to be very convenient indeed, because Rami Davidian is a huge liar.
I know you have more to say about him, Rami Davidian, and some of these other characters that we just saw in that in those clips. But let's start with those claims themselves. Why do you think they are not credible?
Right. First, let's go back to that UN report again by Pramila Patten, the UN Secretary General's special representative on sexual violence and armed conflict. And here's what it says about the claims about objects being inserted into people's private parts. This is paragraph 65 of the report, which actually rejects a number of the most prominent Israeli atrocity claims about October 7th. But look at that last sentence. It says, quote, allegations of objects found inserted in female genital organs also could not be verified by the mission team due in large part to the limited availability and low quality of imagery. And then this is paragraph 47 of the same UN report, which addresses the claims about the positions in which bodies were allegedly observed. It points to, quote, erroneous interpretations of the state of bodies by some volunteer first responders without relevant qualifications and expertise. Some examples include mistaking post-mortem pugilistic posturing, a boxer-like body posture with flexed elbows, clenched fists, spread legs, and flexed knees due to burn damage as indicative of sexual violence, misinterpreting anal dilation due to post-mortem changes as indicative of anal penetration, and mischaracterizing grazing gunshot wounds to genitalia as targeted genital mutilation using knives. End quote. And those are all precisely things that you heard people in the Sandberg film saying, especially the people from Zaka. You saw Chaim Mazgin claiming that he saw people with clenched fists like this as if they were trying to defend themselves. And you just heard what the UN report said about that. Now, I also want you to keep in mind those words, burn damage, because so many of the people in this film refer to bodies being burned and torn apart. And what is the most likely explanation for that? I'd suggest that the obvious explanation, one the film doesn't discuss at all, is Israel's massive and indiscriminate use of helicopter gunships and other powerful weapons that cause precisely the kind of injuries described by the people in the film and the UN report. Remember that the Israeli police have already admitted that Israel fired on people at the supernova rave using Apache helicopters. And of course, not just at the supernova rave. The dozens of Apaches were firing indiscriminately. And as we at the Electronic Intifada have reported many times, All based on Israeli sources, Israel applied the so-called Hannibal Directive on October 7th, a military doctrine that allows Israel to kill its own people rather than allowing them to be captured by an enemy.
Right. So the UN has rejected the claims about objects being inserted into bodies, systematically, and the mutilation of genitals. But what are other people saying?
Yeah, there are several examples of even generally pro-Israel media sources looking at the so-called evidence and concluding that these claims are simply not credible. So let's take a look, for example, at this March 5th article from NBC News about the UN report on alleged sexual violence on October 7th. And right there, you can see that NBC itself looked at the materials Israel gave to the UN team and that supposedly show objects inserted into women's genitalia. And NBC says, quote, NBC News was also shown the photos, but could not independently confirm that nails or a knife had been inserted in the women's bodies based solely on the images, end quote. And even Israel's Haaretz newspaper is unable to swallow the claims in that April 18th article that is actually trying to support the contention that the mass rapes took place. Haaretz was apparently shown the same photos by 𝐓𝐿 Mazgin that we just saw Sheryl Sandberg looking at. Haaretz says, quote, Mazgin showed several of the photographs in his possession to Haaretz, including the one said to show nails having been inserted into the groin. The photograph was taken almost a week after the massacre and is definitely of poor quality. The possibility that what is depicted is indeed nails seems reasonable, certainly in combination with his testimony, but it's impossible to determine this unequivocally, end quote. So Haaretz is clearly trying to put the best possible spin on this to support Mazgin's claims, but even they are unwilling to endorse them.
You said you wanted to take a closer look at some of these characters, including, of course, the Zaka volunteers. Who do you want to start with?
Well, let's start with 𝐓𝐿 Mazgin. And many viewers will already recognize that Mazgin works for Zaka, the Jewish extremist group whose members have been marketed worldwide as first responders in order to give them more credibility. That's why they see them in those yellow vests. You're supposed to think that these are selfless, rescuers. In fact, what members of Zaka do is collect bodies and body parts from scenes of disasters or violence in order to bury them. Regular viewers will also know that Zaka and its members were responsible for some of the most notorious atrocity propaganda since October 7th, including the totally false and disproven claim about a pregnant woman having the fetus cut out of her, and the stories of children being tied together and burned. None of that happened. Now, the well-known lies of Zaka ought to be enough to discredit anyone from that organization. But it's particularly absurd for Mazgin to be put forward as a champion of victims of sexual assault. Now, Zaka was founded by a Jewish extremist with a history of terrorist violence, a man called Yehuda Meshi Zahav. And here I want to thank our colleague David Sheen for allowing me to use some of his background research on Zaka and Mazgin that he's done for a forthcoming article about October 7th atrocity propaganda. So during the 1980s, the founder of Zaka, Yehuda Meshi Zahav, led Keshet, a gang of ultra-Orthodox extremists that terrorized Jewish residents of Jerusalem to punish them for using electricity on the Sabbath, for displaying photographs of females, and for selling secular newspapers. Meshi Zahav later went on to found Zaka and ran it for 3 decades. In 2021, Israeli police opened an investigation into allegations that Meshi Zahav used his power, first as head of Keshet and then as the head of Zaka, to commit violent sex crimes against adults and children, male and female, for over 4 decades. Many of his victims finally had the courage to come forward. Take a look at this article from Ynet, one of Israel's biggest news outlets, and this is from March 2021. You can see there that Meshi Zahav's horrific sex crimes against children were an open secret in the Haredi or ultra-Orthodox community, and many people were even calling him the Haredi Jeffrey Epstein. A few weeks after the police investigation into Meshi Zahav's sex crimes was opened, he attempted suicide, and in fact, he died a year later. And while all of his horrible crimes were being revealed and investigated, one of his chief public defenders was none other than his Zaka colleague, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜𝐿. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 even told Israeli Army Radio that Meshi Zahav was the victim of blackmail by his accusers, and that, quote, the last thing he is capable of doing is hurting others, end quote. So there you have it. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 from the discredited extremist group Zaka is one of Sheryl Sandberg's star witnesses in her film defending alleged victims of rape. But he himself is a staunch defender of a man credibly accused of raping dozens of children over a period spanning 4 decades.
It's unbearable. You also said you wanted to talk more about Rami Davidian, the man we saw just a few minutes ago who claimed to see women tied to trees and various objects inserted into them.
Yes. Interestingly, Rami Davidian has already told his story, or rather stories, since the versions seem to change constantly. And here he is, for example, featured on a website called Humans of Tel Aviv, giving his account of October 7th. He is identified not as a first responder like in the Sandberg film, but as a farmer from Moshav Patish, a Zionist colonial settlement a few miles east of the boundary with Gaza. In that account, Davidian claims that he helped rescue hundreds of people from the supernova rave, including one young woman in particular. And this is what he's quoted as saying: I got a location from Rotem, one of the girls who escaped the party, and she texted me that she was hiding behind a tree. I drove to her location, honking my car so she could hear me approaching her. When I got to her location, I saw she was surrounded by 5 terrorists. I didn't flinch and shouted at them in Arabic, Ahlan, my name is Abu Rami. I'm Muslim, and it's better that you give the girl to me and escape from here as fast as you can because the whole area is full of armed security forces. I wasn't afraid. It was pure instincts. Luckily, they thought I was a Bedouin, and because they were already on the run, they gave me the girl to me and ran off, end quote. Now, I found that Davidian has told this story, this version of the rescue, countless times in interviews. But he also gave his account in a video posted on the YouTube channel of the World Mizrahi Organization in December. It's a 5-minute video, but we're just going to watch a short clip where he tells the tale of his heroic rescue of that woman.
קילצתי מספר בנות, הם אמרו לי שחברה שלהם תקועה תחת איזשהו ואדי באיזשהו מקום, ולא היה קליטה, היה קשה מאוד להגיע אליה, והיא בוכה, מתחננת שאני אציל אותה. ואז אמרתי, טוב, אני מתחיל לצפצף עם האוטו, ככל שאת שומעת שזה מתגבר, את מכוונת אותי כן, 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 הצלחתי להגיע אליה. התחלתי לרוץ, ראיתי אותה עם 5 או 6 גברים. הסתכלתי צדדים, ראיתי נשקים. ואז הבנתי שהם מחבלים, ולא יודע אם הבאתי את הכוחות. מצאתי שטוצר של ממטרה, רק חקלאי יודע מה זה שטוצר. הצלחתי להשכיב אותם ברצפה, הכנסתי אותה לאוטו, והבאתי אותה אליי הביתה, ועוד פעם חזרתי לשטח. זה נז, האישה הזו ניצלה. ניצלה. אני לא צריך את הזכות הזאת. אני לא צריך את הזכות הזאת פה. לא עשיתי את זה בזכות.
As you can see there, Rami Davidian is really good at turning on the waterworks in front of the camera.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to read the English subtitles again for those who are listening rather than watching. He says, in one case, I rescued several girls. They told me their friend was stuck in a wadi in the middle of nowhere. There was no cell phone reception. It was very difficult to reach her. and she cried, begging me to save her. Then I said, fine, I'll start honking with the car, and the louder it gets, you direct me. Yes, yes, yes. I managed to reach her. I started running. I saw her with 5 or 6 men. I looked to the sides. I saw weapons. Then I realized they were terrorists. I don't know where I got the strength from. I found a pipe of a sprinkler. Only a farmer knows what that is. I managed to knock them to the ground. I put her in the car, brought her to my house, and once again returned to the area. It's a miracle that this woman was saved. I don't want that merit. I don't ever want that merit. I didn't do it for the merit, end quote. So as you can see there, what you immediately notice there is that these accounts are very different. In the first one, he somehow scares off the 5 armed terrorists who've supposedly come to kill everyone in sight just by scolding them in Arabic. He doesn't say anything about fighting them off with a pipe. He just managed to either charm them or scare them or convince them by pretending to be a Muslim. He is in fact Jewish, but he says he pretended to be a Muslim. In the second story, he heroically knocks 5 armed terrorists, as he calls them, to the ground with nothing but a piece of pipe. I mean, what do you think? How credible is that?
I mean, he's watched a lot of movies.
Right. This is like a script from a superhero movie.
Yeah.
So he's clearly not a very credible witness. And it's also notable that in the vast majority of his interviews that I saw, Davidian makes no claims whatsoever about seeing any signs of sexual violence. The earliest instance I could find of Davidian claiming to have seen anything related to sexual violence, the kind of things he describes to Sheryl Sandberg, date from early February, 4 months after October 7th, in a report from the Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel, an organization that has played a key role in trying to launder the mass rape hoax. And the last thing I'll say about Rami Davidian is that even if he can't keep his stories straight, he does seem to be enjoying the limelight. He's become a sort of a minor celebrity in Israel, doing speaking events like this one in April, where for the price of 60 shekels, that's about $15, you can go and listen to him tell his tales of heroism. And he's even gone on a speaking tour of Italy recently.
Right, except he doesn't want any merit, as he says.
No, a very, very modest character.
Yeah. Are there other characters in the film that you want to highlight?
Yeah, we don't have time to talk about all of them, but none of them are really any more convincing than what we've seen. But I'm going to mention a couple. Sandberg interviews a woman called Tali Binner, a survivor of the violence at the Supernova rave, and we saw a little clip of her earlier. Binner says she was hiding in a caravan, or a trailer as people in North America call it, for hours with 3 friends on October 7th. And here's a clip of her telling Sandberg what happened.
After 1 hour that we were in the trailer, I started to hear yelling of women. I heard a girl that started to yell for a long time. It was like, please don't, no, stop. No. It was like she was asking someone to stop. What can they stop? Someone is abusing her, someone touching her, someone is doing something.
How do you know that? Or why do you think that?
I know how it sounds. Like, I can understand how it sounds. There's no way that women will scream that loud for so long if it's not for asking for help because someone is doing something sexually to her.
So at no point does Tali Binner claim that she saw any of these rapes taking place. And as I said, she claims that there were other people hiding in the caravan with her. Presumably, they would have heard the same things she says she heard, but they do not appear in the film to corroborate what she says. And I did some research, and as far as I could find, this is the first time that Tali Binnah claims to have been not so much an eyewitness, but an ear witness to rapes. But it is not her first time talking to the media. She was interviewed on Israel's Channel 13 on November 11th, and she gives her account of hiding in the caravan. But during that interview, which is in Hebrew, she does not mention or imply anything whatsoever about sexual violence. And we could find no, and that on the screen you just see is her on Channel 13 back in November. And I could find no previous interview or statement from Tali Binnah making any allegation that she was a witness to any kind of sexual assault. And another person that we see in the Sandberg film is Raz Cohen. He's a familiar face who appeared in Jeffrey Gettleman's New York Times story and has given lots of interviews since October 7th with a constantly changing story about a supposed rape he witnessed. In the Sandberg film, he gives a very brief, vague version of his discredited account. And I think I'll simply say that people could go back and watch a segment on the Jeffrey Gettleman piece that we did on the live stream in January to get the full picture about Cohen and why he is not a credible witness.
Yeah. Speaking of the discredited Jeffrey Gettleman piece in the New York Times from December, you said you wanted to talk more about that. How does this tie into the film, apart from it being very similarly titled?
As we saw at the beginning of our discussion, Sheryl Sandberg was still praising Gettleman's piece in February at that event at Columbia University. She was holding it up as this amazing, exemplary piece of journalism. So you would think that many of the main examples of alleged rape that Gettleman wrote about would be highlighted in Sandberg's film. But many of the most lurid stories Gettleman and his Israeli co-authors wrote about are completely absent from the film. There is one, however, that is given a very short treatment in the film, and it's very telling how little attention it gets. Let's take a look at that clip.
Who stepped forward, a young woman who hid in the bushes, and described that very close to her, a few yards from her, there was a group of Hamas terrorists who pulled by the hair another woman who was stripped from the waist down.
הוא מושך לה בשיער, היה לה שיער ארוך, הוא מושך לה בשיער. היא לא לבושה, ובעצם אני מבינה שהוא אנס אותה. הוא בעצם משנע אותה. כאילו, ממש אני זוכרת את התמונה הזאת. ואז מעבירים אותה לעוד מישהו, והוא חותך לה את השד. הוא חותך לה את השד, הוא זורק את זה על הכביש, הם משחקים עם זה.
So that woman speaking in Hebrew with the blurred face is the one identified by Jeffrey Gettleman only by the first name Sapir. And for those who are listening, she describes hiding in a ditch and seeing Hamas fighters rape a woman, and then one of them cuts off her breast and tosses it on the road, and then they toss the breast around and play with it like a ball. This is a claim that has been repeated by countless media outlets over the last 6 months. The video of her speaking, and it's a longer video originally, was actually presented at a press conference by the Israeli police soon after October 7th. In the same video, Sapir claims that she saw the Hamas men beheading several women and dancing around with the detached heads. That is not mentioned in Sandberg's film because it totally discredits Sapir's account. As we pointed out in our January segment on the Gettleman piece, this could not have happened without leaving masses of physical evidence, including huge amounts of blood and DNA. And of course, where are the severed heads and the headless bodies? Gettleman was challenged about this after his original Screams Without Words article, which was published on December 28th. How could the Times have published such an extraordinary, outlandish claim without any corroboration whatsoever? The New York Times published a follow-up piece by Gettelman and his Israeli co-authors Anat Schwartz and Adam Seller on January 29th to try to repair the damage. And it contains this quite extraordinary claim. The police said they found Sapir's bag where she said she had been hiding and women's clothing near where she said the rapes occurred. And 3 severed heads were found farther away near the bodies of assailants in military fatigues, Israeli officials said without providing more detail, end quote. And I mean, that's stunning. As far as I know, of course, none of that was mentioned in the first article, which Jeffrey Gettelman claims they spent months on and interviewed 150 people. It never occurred to them to ask the Israeli police, well, do you have any evidence? But conveniently, the Israeli police said for his follow-up article after he was criticized, oh yeah, by the way, we did find the heads. But as far as I know, Jeffrey Gettelman and the New York Times are the only outlets to ever claim that the Israeli police found 3 severed heads. That has never been reported in Israeli media as far as I've been able to find. And you can imagine that this would be a huge story. You would have seen it in multiple outlets, not just in Israel, but all over the world. Gettelman just dropped it in passing. He doesn't say if he asked the police if they have crime scene photos of these heads or women's clothes or of the alleged assailants that were found dead. There's been no claim that there is any DNA evidence. It's just a passing sentence in Gettelman's second article, and there has been no follow-up by the New York Times. Surely, if these heads existed, the story told by Sapir would have been a central part of Sandberg's film. Surely the police superintendent that we saw talking about how much evidence there is would have specifically mentioned this shocking crime and crime scene and all the evidence. Surely the women would have been identified. But instead, it's just mentioned briefly near the end of the film with no mention of the severed heads whatsoever. I'll also mention that Gettelman claimed that there was a second eyewitness to what Sapir said she saw, a man named Ura Carroll. But as we showed in our segment on the New York Times piece back in January, Carroll had previously told Israeli media that he did not see any of this taking place, but only that Sapir had told him about it. And he does not make an appearance in the Sandberg film either. So the story of the dancing Hamas men with the severed heads has just disappeared.
I mean, I just keep remembering Gettelman when he was being interviewed by Sheryl Sandberg at Columbia University all those months ago, saying that as a journalist, it's not his job to provide evidence. He just relays information that he's given. Extraordinary. What are some of the stories that were in the Gettelman piece in the New York Times that do not appear in the Sandberg film?
Right. The first one, of course, is the case of Gal Abdush, an Israeli woman who was killed on October 7th. Gettelman made her the poster child victim of the alleged mass rape, but that story totally fell apart when Gal Abdush's family repudiated it. As Mondo Ice reported within days of the publication of the original story, members of Gal Abdush's family said they'd never been shown any evidence that Abdush was raped, that the known facts about her final moments made it impossible, and that the New York Times had manipulated and deceived the family. Another major alleged case Gettelman and his co-authors highlighted was that of 2 teenage girls who were supposedly found murdered and raped in Kibbutz Be'eri, and that there was semen on one of their bodies. That story was already debunked at the time we talked about the New York Times article on this live stream again at the beginning of January. But since then, it has been comprehensively disproven by other publications as well, including The Intercept and even the New York Times itself. It simply never happened. And there you see a headline from March 4th in The Intercept: Kibbutz Be'eri rejects story in New York Times October 7th expose. They were not sexually abused. It's not true, said the kibbutz spokesperson of one of the stories featured in the paper's controversial article. And again, that's referring to the story of these two teenage girls in kibbutz Be'eri. And you can also see right here, we'll show the New York Times itself reporting on March 25th that, quote, new video has surfaced that undercuts the account of an Israeli military paramedic who said two teenagers killed in the Hamas-led terrorist attack on October 7th were sexually assaulted. And then a bit further down in the same article, the Times says, quote, Nili Bar Sinai, a member of a group from the kibbutz that looked into the claims of sexual assault at the house, said, this story is false. Reached by the Times, the medic declined to say whether he still stood by the account, saying he would like to put the attacks behind him. End quote. I bet he would like to put that behind him. But strangely, or perhaps not so strangely, the New York Times is still refusing to retract the Gettleman piece. But their pretense that everything is okay is not making the scandal go away. This week, more than 50 tenured professors from top journalism schools wrote to the New York Times urging them to, quote, immediately commission a group of journalism experts to conduct a thorough and full independent review of the reporting, editing, and publishing processes for this story and release a report of the findings. And end quote there. And I'd just like to remind viewers that it was us here at the Electronic Intifada and a tiny handful of other independent outlets, including Mondoweiss, The Gray Zone, and then much later The Intercept, who raised the alarm about this story right from the start. I also want to acknowledge here the research by 𝐓𝐡𝐞, the anonymous user of Twitter or X, who has done first-rate work throughout in debunking this hoax. And there are other individuals on Twitter as well who uncovered important things. For example, the repudiation of the Gal Abdush story by her sister Miral Alta. Their research helped me with today's segment as well. I think that the fact that the key claims that were in Gettleman's story are completely absent from the Sheryl Sandberg film is effectively an admission that they are totally false. Not even Sheryl Sandberg is prepared to stand by them. But I think her failure to acknowledge anywhere in the film how much false and debunked reporting there has been, false reporting that she publicly endorsed at that Columbia event in February. This reveals that she never set out to make a documentary, but a piece of atrocity propaganda, and that's what her film is. We can tell a lot about her agenda by what's in the film, but also what's not in it. And the fact that Sandberg and other proponents of the mass rape hoax never address these debunked stories reveals their basic, glaring dishonesty.
Well, finally, Ali, as you said, we and others have debunked this mass rape story time and time again, and yet they keep coming back with it. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I'll go back to what we've said all along. Claims that Black and brown men, colonized men, are sexual savages who rape white women and settler women is as old as colonialism. And this excuse has been used, or this lie has been used for centuries to justify the dehumanization, murder, and genocide of enslaved people, of colonized people, of indigenous people around the world. And it's that same narrative being recycled for a 21st century genocide. That is what's going on here. And it's simply a desperate effort to distract from the genocide, to distract from the student uprising, the student intifada that's going on all over the country. And I think Israel considers it to be the best, or they think their strongest card to play with more left-leaning, progressive, and liberal opinion in the West, where support for Israel is just crashing. But what it amounts to is vile, genocidal, atrocity propaganda, which is being used to justify mass murder of mostly the vast majority of the people being murdered in Gaza by Israel and the United States and Germany and their other allies are women and children. Men are being murdered, of course, and men are no more deserving of this fate. I'm not implying that, but the vast majority of victims are women and children. The people that Sheryl Sandberg and Hillary Clinton and other promoters of this vile propaganda claim to care about so much.
Well, thank you for that. I know that took a long time and a lot of exhaustive research. Having to watch that film several times. I mean, these are the sacrifices that that we make at the Electronic Intifada. Thank you so much, Ali, for that work.
Thank you. And I just want to thank Tamara because
Yeah.
I threw a lot of media at her over the last, I don't know how long it's been, I bet close to an hour. And she just did a tremendous job supporting me in doing this, as did Asa, and of course you and all our colleagues, David Sheen and others as well. So thank you all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I want to see if we can get Donya Abu Sitta. We may have figured out the mic issue. Donya, are you there? Hi.
Yes, hi.
Oh, fantastic.
Yay, Donya.
Hi, Donya. How are you?
I'm really fine. What about you?
We're just really happy to see you and hear you and be able to talk about your incredible work. Do you want to tell us how things are right now in Gaza for you, for your family, for the people that you're with?
Okay. I used to live in Khan Younis, which is the most beautiful city in the world, as I believe. However, due to ongoing genocide, my family and I have been forced to evacuated multiple times. But the hardest evacuations when we evacuated to Rafah. A part of my heart still remains in Khan Younis. Now I am speaking to you from a sea of tents surrounding by lost dream and the stories of my people. If you were to come to the door of my tent, it's not a door like you imagined, but you would see two opposite completely situations. In the front of me, there are Palestinian tents filled with fear, fear of death, whether death by bombing, hunger, or diseases. There is no light, no electricity, no safety, no drinking water, no food, and no documentations. But behind me, there are Egyptian's border, where all the necessities of the lives are available. Every night, before I go to sleep, I think about my life before the genocide, and I'm really wonder if it will ever return. It's hard to believe that it has been 6 months since this genocide started. To be honest, I remember waking up on October 7 at 6:34 a.m. to terrifying sound of missiles and bombing, and this sound still till now. At the first, we thought it would be only few days, weeks, or maximum a month before we return to our homes, but this genocide continues to this day. It's important to note that a genocide doesn't mean killing people, destroying homes, displacing family, kidnapping children, and disappear families. A genocide involves to destroy the way of life. Everything we know about Gaza before has disappeared. Every beautiful street now is a rubble. Every building has destroyed or damaged. Everyone lost a loved one or at least a dream. In short, our lives in Gaza has been completely turned upside down. For example, our education system has greatly affected in this genocide. The education is highly valued among families in the state of Palestine, with 95.4% of children enrolled in basic educations. However, the reality of Gaza students has tragic since this genocide started. On October 7th, Israel has deliberately destroyed and target the future of Gaza students using violence and bombing to destroy their schools and universities and disrupt their educations. The Palestinian Ministry of Education has reported that Since this genocide started, there are over 5,000 students have been killed and 8,000 injured. In addition, there are 255 teachers and administrators have been killed and more than 891 injured. The Palestinian ministry also reported that 286 government schools and 65 UNRWA schools have been bombed and vandalized, with 111 severely damaged and 40 completely destroyed. Now I'm asking Tamara if she could share with us a video of my students. Can you share it?
We will do that, yeah. It just takes a few seconds.
Okay, take your time.
Here it comes.
I am Tuka from Khan Younis. I love my school and my teacher. Before this war, I went to school just a few weeks before this war began. As all children in the world, I need to continue my studying. So help us to rebuild our school and life.
This is Tuqa, one of the best students for me, because before the genocide she was in grade 1. However, she and all students in Gaza Strip don't go to university and schools now. Many of these schools have been turned into shelters for hundreds of thousands of citizens, displaced people by this war. Students will view their schools differently when they return to their study, because students have been lived in these schools. To be honest, they lived the most difficult moments in these schools. These schools became a nightmare for students because they have suffered to bring drinking water and food. And even the simplest thing, going to bathroom, take more time than usual. Even the university, 6 of the 7 the 7 original university have been damaged and vandalized. Al-Isra University, Al-Aqsa University, Al-Quds Open University, Al-Aqsa University, and the Islamic University, all these universities have been bombed and destroyed. In Gaza, there is no safety, no security, no access to education facilities. Israel deliberately has destroyed students' dreams by attacking their schools and universities and bombing it and assassinating the academics, for ignoring the Palestinians and silencing them to disappear the voice of the truth. For example, they assassinating Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿 just because he showed his suffering and the stories of his people to all the world. He makes our voice louder and louder to make the truth show to all the world. We will continue to follow Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿 footsteps, and our issue will present as long as we live.
Thank you so much, Donya. And thank you for your words about Dr. 𝐓𝐡. And this week we heard the terrible news about his daughter Shaima, and we know that Shaima was his inspiration as well, and we say Allah yarhamhum, and thank you for remembering them, and thank you for that really wonderful report, because I think that, you know, a lot of the world isn't talking about the lack of education now. Children have been out of school for more than seven months, and you continue to focus on education. You wrote a recent article for us about the destruction of the education system in Gaza, and you were a teacher before the war. You are a teacher.
Yes.
And let me ask you, now, during the war, is there still, you're still in touch with your students, like the young girl we saw? Is there still some way to teach the children? Do you still meet with them? Do you still help them? Tell us about how you stay in touch with the children.
Yes, at first I touched with the families of my students because the students is still young. I wanted to keep touching them because I wanted to learn them a new things and even the new vocabulary or stories about the war because they must be aware of what's happening around them.
And also, Donya, you have now moved away from Khan Yunis, your beautiful city. I've only visited Khan Yunis once in my life for one day, and I can say it is a beautiful city and more beautiful than the city, the people of Khan Yunis. And now tell us about what the situation is around you. You talk about living in a tent. Just talk about what do you think people around the world should know about the situation for daily life in Gaza now?
Okay, to be honest, the daily life is very hard in these days because the Israeli occupations think about enter Rafah. It doesn't mean enter Rafah to safety or something positive, but they think to destroy the last city in Gaza Strip. So the people in Rafah city now thinking about evacuated for Khan Yunis or another city in the middle area in the Gaza Strip because they think it may be more safer for them. But there is no safety place in Gaza Strip because every area has been targeted in the same time. There is many targeting and bombing in the Gaza Strip. And the daily life, it's very hard for the adults and the young because children every day go to bring drinking water or food, and they take more time than usual. It maybe take many hours or maybe they return with nothing. So this situations for children. What about adults? Children must be in their schools and must live a childhood, not do this hardest things.
It's unimaginable. Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, Donya, you're a teacher, you're a writer, you're a wonderful writer, and I'm learning from you now. And also, we're very lucky that several members of your family, Lubna, Jana, and Hassan, also write for the Electronic Intifada and teach the world about what's happening in Gaza. I just want to ask you how they're doing, and if you can please give them our love as well, and let them know that we appreciate all of you.
Okay, I will do that, and they send to you the love and all thanks.
Thank you very much.
But I wanted to add something. Can I?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Finally, I have a message from Gaza students to American students. Thank you for your voice because your voice reached to all the world. And please keep on. And I want to thank you because your website helped us to make our people around the world read our stories and know about Gaza and make Israeli injustice appear to all the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Donya. We're all here with you, and we're going to keep in touch, and we'll have you back on as soon as we can. Keep writing. We can't wait to read what you write for us next.
And it's our honor to work with you, and we look forward to better days, inshallah, soon. We look forward to an end to this horrible genocide, and for all the people of Khan Yunis and all the people in Gaza to return to their homes, and for the Abu Sitta family to return not just to their homes in Khan Yunis, but to their homes in Palestine, which we've been learning about in some of our recent live streams from the great Dr. Salman Abu Sitta, the historian, who is also part of your great family. And we really appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donya.
We hope to see you again very soon.
Yes,
I hope
absolutely.
so.
Thank you, Donya. Incredible. I'm so glad that worked out finally in the end. That was wonderful. She's extraordinary. Just extraordinary. Well, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. Let's bring on Jon for his resistance report. Hello, Jon.
Hi, guys. It's great to see Donya.
Yeah.
Hi, Jon.
Hi, Ali.
So you're going to be taking a look at videos from the resistance in Gaza and in Lebanon, along with the Yemenis downing of another U.S. Reaper drone. Yeah, let's get right into it.
Okay, let's do it. We're going to start in the northeast of Gaza in Beit Hanun. The Israelis reinvaded Beit Hanun 2 weeks ago for a few days, and as soon as they did that, there was resistance videos from Beit Hanun. And as Abu Ubaidah said, the spokesperson for 𝐓𝐿 the other day, everywhere they go, everywhere the Israelis go, we're there, and that's proof in Beit Hanun. If we could go to just 0 here, Tamara. Also, it's worth pointing out that that when the Israelis said that they had taken control of Beit Hanun, 90% of the Jewish Israeli population thought they were winning the war. And today, less than 60% believe they're winning the war, despite not really getting any of the news from on the ground in Gaza. It's clear to the Israeli public that they're not winning the war either. So we're seeing here a 𝐓𝐿 Brigade's Yassin 105 strike against a D9 armored bulldozer built by Caterpillar in the United States, as we point out every time. And this is in Beit Hanun. This was a video that was released just the day before yesterday, but it's dated the 22nd of April. The Israelis are gone from Beit Hanun now, as they are from all areas of Gaza except for the corridor, which we will talk about coming up. So this is one of the more than 1,000 Yassin strikes against Israeli armored vehicles that we're seeing. Presumably fighters able to access this area through tunnels, still able to move around throughout the Gaza Strip, as they have been throughout this war now, 7 months on, and the resistance is still able to carry on these attacks at any place that the Israelis reinvade. The Israeli plan right now is to stay in these buffer zones and to carry out these raids periodically. That's their intention. The resistance is making that a difficult proposition for the Israelis, as we have seen for the past 6 months. Let's check out number 1 here, Tamara. This is an Al-Ghul sniper attack. This is a sniper attack also in Beit Hanun, also by the 𝐓𝐿 Brigades. We're looking at footage through the cameraman. This is something that we consistently see from the Palestinians, constant surveillance of the Israelis when they're moving around. And this is another Al-Ghul sniper attack. This is one of 50 Al-Ghul sniper attacks that the resistance has reported, and many of them that we've seen on video, and many of them we have shown here. This is again edited. These I'll say that these videos are all from the last week. Again, I'm still reporting things that happened in the last week since you last saw us here on the show. And so this Al-Ghul attack was one of 50, as I said, one of 50 sniper attacks, and we have edited the video. You don't see the soldier falling. And then you also don't see all of his comrades running away and leaving him, which is something that we have seen also through many of these sniper attacks. And the Israelis didn't claim casualties on this. We have been following their casualty reports, and we try to match them up. We know that they've been lying about their casualties. Their casualty statistics don't add up, even in their own numbers. The IDF said at the beginning, at the new year, that they were going to have a new transparency to their reporting. And that lasted for about 2 weeks till January 14th. And they haven't updated any of their numbers since then. So we've edited out this hit, and the Israelis edited out this from their statistics as well. But these videos, of course, always show us the reality that otherwise we wouldn't see if these units didn't have media embedded in their units. We wouldn't be seeing this, and we would just be getting the Israeli side of the story, as we heard from Ali before, that has just been full of lies since October 7th and is a core part of their information operations, clearly, that we've seen. So this sniper attack, we edited out the hit. Let's go to number 5 tomorrow, because this week the 𝐤𝐿 Brigades released 2 videos, extended footage videos that we haven't seen before. This one to Al Jazeera Arabic, showing them rigging up a tunnel ambush, which you can see them here. This is the first time we've seen them inside tunnels, preparing the tunnel ambushes that we've seen. We've seen reports of more than 50 of them, as the Israelis attempt to, they haven't even, I was going to say they attempt to root out the tunnels in Gaza, but they haven't even really been doing that. We remember early on in the war, they were counting every tunnel shaft. They've stopped doing that. The pretense that they're actually going to defeat the resistance in Gaza has fallen away. We know that their military operation is basically revenge and destruction. There's nothing like a systematic attack on the resistance. They're just destroying the Gaza Strip. And these tunnel ambushes are one of the reasons why they stopped going down in tunnels into the same way that they had intended to at the beginning. We're watching here Qassam fighters burying one of the many different types of anti-personnel mines that the Palestinians have created. And all of these weapons are built in Gaza. And the what we're seeing here is, in this Al Jazeera video, is 4 different types of explosive devices built in Gaza. We can see the way that they have set up these devices in the tunnels. The key to these tunnel ambushes is, of course, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, which the Palestinians have significant in the Gaza Strip, of course, their own neighborhoods. They know the area. And they are able to move through their tunnels corresponding to above the ground. We're watching here. This is the first footage that we've seen of their jumping IED. This is an IED that 𝐤𝐿 Brigades invented that shoots up 1 meter from the ground and then explodes into shrapnel. You can see the shrapnel radius of what they call the kill zone of these devices. Now we're looking at what they call a guerrilla action device. This is maybe the most famous of their IEDs, because these are we have seen the fighters literally attaching these devices to Israeli armored vehicles. It's attached with a magnet, and then it has a clip. Once the pin is pulled, there's 4 seconds that the fighter has to get out of the way. We're showing here research and development by the 𝐤𝐿 Brigades. And this has been an important part of the armed struggle that we've seen for the last 7 months, is that the Palestinians are still able to fight after all this time because they have built their own indigenous weapons industry. And you can see here in this footage from Al Jazeera that they're showing us research and development of these weapons. And just to give you a sense, in 2005, the Shawaz IED, explosively formed penetrator, it was in their 8th edition by 2005. So the research and development is constant. And this is a program that was started by Adnan Al-Ghul. And the idea basically was, because the Palestinians are living under siege constantly, the idea of importing their weapons wasn't practical. They had to build the weapons themselves with the raw materials that they had in Gaza. In some cases, that's unexploded ordnance. Some cases, it's other weapons that are repurposed. And so they have built this industry for themselves, and that's the reason why they're able to carry on fighting after all this time. They built their own hand grenades. They built their own rockets and mortars. They built their own anti-tank weapons that we've seen, of course, the Yasin 105. And they built their own improvised explosive devices. So we're seeing all 4 different types of their explosive devices here being used in this video. Let's go to number 6 here, Tamara, because this is a Hornet strike that we saw. This is extended footage of an anti-tank missile strike that the Palestinians carried out in December. This is a Hornet anti-tank missile strike against a convoy. And they released this to Al-Arabi television, showing us the surveillance of this operation and the extended footage of this operation. This is something that's going to happen, I think, increasingly as this war, or as the time passes after the war. We're going to see extended footage of these operations. You can see the tank convoy here. You can just see the destruction, total destruction all over. This is in December, and it's still destroyed, or it was destroyed as of December, and it's only been worse in the months since then. So you can see them tracking this convoy of armored vehicles here. They're tanks and Aton fighting vehicles. And now we're seeing drone footage. This is drone footage captured by the Qassam brigades from the Israelis. And I showed you this in previous episodes where the Palestinians have commandeered Israeli drones and landed them safely without any scratches on the vehicle, on the drones at all. And that's what we're seeing here, is Qassam matching this drone footage that they captured of the aftermath of this Hornet anti-tank missile strike. And you can see the burning armored vehicle there, the burning Jeep. This was an attack on a Jeep. And you can see this from the Israeli drone footage from the scene. So the Qassam brigades released this week to Al Arabiya television. And that's what you can see now. We're seeing the drone actually literally be landed by the Israeli troops. And so this is the kind of footage that I think we're going to see a lot more of this in the coming months, because the edits of the Qassam videos are very tight edits. But we know that they're recording before and after that footage. So I think we're going to see more of this. This is one of very few Hornet anti-tank missile strikes. This is a weapon that Hezbollah has used to great effect in Lebanon. And the Palestinians have these weapons, but we haven't seen them very often. This is an imported weapon. And we've seen it in Beit Lahia. This is Beit Lahia, which is in the northwest of Gaza. They seem to have the Hornet, but the Palestinians made the crucial decision of building their own anti-tank weapon, the Yasin 105 tandem charge. They built that weapon instead of building their resistance strategy around the Hornet anti-tank missile, which would be imported and subject to the siege that the Gaza Strip is under. And so that's not a practical resistance strategy. The resistance strategy that Adnan al-Ghul founded was to build their own weapons with their own raw materials inside the Gaza Strip, and to put these weapons in the hands of all of their fighters, rather than having a few specialized units that can carry out these weapons, rather than having to rely on outside sources for the importation of the weapons. That the Palestinians built their own weapons in the Gaza Strip. So we're seeing here footage of the drone that has been commandeered and landed by the Palestinians that shows their own attack from the Israeli perspective, which is just a very interesting video. That this is the first time Qassam has released a video of this sort. And they released it to Al Arabi television earlier this week. So if we could go to maybe number 8 here, Tamara. This is a Saraya al-Quds operation. The resistance has been targeting the corridor where the Israelis, the Netzarim corridor. I'll talk about that more in a moment. But this is this is rocket artillery. All the Palestinian factions have these rocket artillery, which is essentially the resistance equivalent of tank shells. And this is a fighter. The fighter's telling us in this footage, he says he salutes to his leaders, the leaders of Islamic Jihad, Ziad Nakala and Akram Ajouri, who is the head of the Sarai al-Quds, the military wing of Islamic Jihad. And the fighters are saying to their leaders in exile, we're here, we're in the field, all is well. And then they carry out this attack. And 5 factions have claimed resistance attacks, mortar attacks along this corridor, which we'll see in the coming weeks. And I'll talk about in a moment here on the show about the pier and the way that this corridor, Netzarim corridor, connects to that pier. So these are artillery operations. I like to bring these videos where they talk about their fighters and they salute their fighters, they salute their leaders. It's something that we've seen them do throughout this war, the Palestinian resistance, both locally and to their leadership in exile. And so I like to bring you these videos of these mortar attacks, these rocket artillery attacks. They're constant. These videos are released all the time. But the last few months, there's so many videos to show. We haven't showed these, but these attacks are carried out constantly. And there's been more than 10,000 of these rocket attacks, according to the Israelis, that they also stopped counting those. 10,000 was a number that was also from early January. So these numbers are consistently going up. And to put that in perspective, as I've said a number of times, the 2014 war, there was 4,000 rockets fired. The 2006 war with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, there was about the same 4,000 or 5,000 rockets. So we're talking double those levels of those famous rocket wars. And this has just become something that's normal because the Palestinians have been able to build this industry and have been able to fight because of building that industry. We'll look at number 9 here tomorrow. This is this is the PFLP Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades. And they're holding up a sign here. This is an operation from Friday, and it says, "For the soul of our comrade Walid Daqqa." And Walid Daqqa was a PFLP operative who was in Israeli prison, the longest serving Palestinian prisoner. He died in captivity. He died in captivity a couple weeks ago, and Israel is refusing to turn over his body, keeping him, as they have done for many, keeping the bodies, not even returning the bodies, not even allowing freedom in death. And so this is the PFLP saluting Walid Daqqa. Again, communication between the West Bank and Gaza, understanding of the history of the struggle, saluting their fighters. And leaving these messages that are dated the same day that we're seeing the attack, showing that these videos are put out immediately. And this is still the case 7 months on. It's still the case for these smaller groups like the PFLP, that they're still fighting. So this idea that Israel is destroying Hamas as a national army is not happening, but it's also not happening to these smaller guerrilla groups. And that is clear by these videos that we see constantly. And putting these sort of handwritten notes and communicating in this way is a further proof to the Israelis, to the Palestinians, to anyone in the world watching that the resistance is still, it's still not only there, but it's still functioning in a way that makes it impossible for Israel to carry out its long-term plan. And that's why we see the Israelis pulling out and carrying out attacks from the air, which is something that we always want to point out, that these, just because the ground war isn't going on every day, the aerial attacks are still going on. The Israelis are still killing scores of people every single day in their homes. And that's going on. People cite the statistic of 34,000, 33,000. That number hasn't really changed in the last few months because of the ability because of Israel wiping out the hospital system, the healthcare system, destroying civil defense crews' equipment that could dig people out of the rubble. There's a lot of people. The number of 34,000 is sadly an undercount of what's going on in Gaza constantly. So let's turn now to the pier here, because this week we covered this the pier, the U.S. building this pier, the intention to build this pier. We've covered this on the program for a couple of months now. But the Israelis only admitted where the location of the pier officially was this weekend. And the Americans confirmed that they have begun construction on the pier. So if we go to number 10 here tomorrow, we just take a look at, we've shown this before on the program, the way that the corridor cuts, the Netzarim corridor cuts the Gaza Strip in half. This is a Scripps News report from the other day that showed us this. The Israelis are calling it Highway 749. It's called Netzarim Corridor from when the Israeli settlers were in the Gaza Strip. This is a famous corridor of struggle in 2000. It's where the Intifada began, really, with the death of Mohammed al-Dura in the first days of the Intifada, the second Intifada in September of 2000. It's a site of struggle throughout. It's one of the reasons why the Israelis pulled out their settlers out of Gaza, is because they were unable to defend their settlements from concerted resistance by the Qassam brigades and other groups. But principally the Qassam brigades, with the strategy of attacking these settlements and making them impossible to live in during the Second Intifada, which preceded the real professionalization of the Qassam brigades as essentially the national army of the Palestinians. And so I just wanted to show you that footage there. If we just take a look at these next ones here tomorrow, you can just roll through them. So this is they have demolished this entire corridor. They started demolishing this corridor in December, but this is the first footage that we've seen from the Israelis of their pier offloading zone. And you can see they've made that corridor. They've completely demolished all of the houses that were along this strip. And they are attempting, I think that this is a project that the Israelis are making up as they go. I don't think this was ever the grand plan, but they are connecting this corridor to the pier that the Americans are building. And that will give the Israelis the ability to traverse the Gaza Strip without actually being inside the territory, to essentially create two ghettos instead of one. And that's the coastal road that you see there. The Israelis are blocking people from taking the coastal road back home to their communities, which is part of the ceasefire negotiations that Hamas is not giving in on that principle, that pillar of the negotiations, to allow people to return home. So we're looking here at a 67-acre piece of land that the Israelis are going to, their intention is to build a base on this and to build a terminal that the Palestinians will have to pass through before heading back home. Again, all of these plans, presumably by the Americans, they were expecting a ceasefire. I don't think the Americans intended for their 1,000 soldiers who are part of this operation to build this pier. I don't think they intended for them to be arriving there under fire as they are. This pier project itself is, the Pentagon admitted in a press conference on Monday, is a $320 million project. And like I said, 1,000 soldiers. And when it's up and running at its full capacity, it can take 150 trucks in a day, which is the number that a single crossing of the 7 crossings can do in 3 hours. Israel says they can do 50 trucks an hour at a single crossing. And so this is all of this $300 million project, this building of this pier, is all to get through in a day at its full peak to get through in a day what can be done at 1 of 7 crossings in 3 hours. And so it's really, this project, this is the pier that you're seeing. It's essentially like Legos. They put it together. This is the floating dock that we're looking at here. So the floating dock is a few miles off the shore. They're going to have the shipments coming from Cyprus on commercial vessels that will come and dock at this pier 3 miles offshore. They will unload the large ship onto trucks and load those trucks onto Army support vessels. Those vessels will then ferry the cargo across the couple miles to the pier. The pier will be attached to the shore. The US says no boots on the ground, so the Israelis will presumably be attaching this pier on the Gaza shoreline. And the plan for after the materials arrive on shore, there's still lots about this plan that we don't know, and I don't think the Americans know. They're not keeping it a secret. They actually don't know how this is going to function. They've promised that this will be up and running within a couple of weeks. But again, there's a lot not known, more not known about this plan than is known about this plan. And from Hamas's perspective, they have said that anyone on the shore that is not Palestinian will be considered an occupying force. So the idea of using Jordanians or the UAE or any of those other countries to offload this on the shore, Hamas has said they could be considered an occupying army. The resistance factions have been targeting that corridor where this is all happening all week, presumably as a message. So it's not clear how any of this stuff will function, but the Americans have begun as of Monday to install this pier. We will obviously keep on top of this as it happens, because this is just a really, the Gaza Strip needs a port more than anything else. And we just want to reiterate that that is not what this is. This is an Israeli and American project that's run by Central Command and the IDF. And it's a way to make these land crossings become less relevant. The Americans can say they're attempting to get in aid that will allow them to continue to back this genocide that we're watching happen every single day. So the Pentagon has said that their troops are out of mortar range, but that's not true of that port area. That there's not a big enough buffer zone to protect that area if Palestinians decide to attack it. It's not clear that the Palestinians will attack it. They're attacking the precursor to it. The Palestinians obviously don't block or attack the aid distribution points. So it's entirely possible that the Palestinians themselves will secure this corridor. But these are not an alternative to the 7 land crossings that Nora talked about in the introduction. It's not an alternative to these. And the idea that you can put this temporary pier and replace the crossings into the Gaza Strip is not part of the ceasefire agreements that the Palestinians will that are in negotiations right now with the Israelis over these ceasefire agreements. These are not part of these agreements because the Palestinians have made it clear that that reconstruction is part of the ceasefire and prisoner exchange agreements, that the siege cannot continue. And just to say, so 150 trucks at this pier, 500 trucks is the siege level of it, that from before October 7th, which was a blockade, was 500 trucks. So this pier is just a fraction of what needs to come in. And we know that there's literally thousands of trucks sitting on the border that could come in with just the Israelis and Americans allowing those trucks to come in. So we'll keep on top of that port. I wanted to bring you that because the Army, both the American and the Israeli Army, finally admitted to that position and the way that it connected to the corridor, which is something that we reported on many weeks ago, based on just the battlefield assessment of where they were going to set up the pier. The Israelis don't control the territory anywhere else to set up this kind of an operation. So it was, I was speculating the location based on battlefield reports. So now we have confirmation of that. So that's the Gaza Strip report. I want to move now to Lebanon, because part of this war is also happening in the north, and the ceasefire negotiations, Hezbollah has said that they will abide by them. But if there's no ceasefire agreement, the war between Hezbollah and Israel in the north will continue. And Hezbollah, let's go to number 15 here, Tamara. Hezbollah on the 200-day anniversary marked 200 days by releasing this video, which is 200 of their attacks, 200 of their 1,650 attacks since October the 8th. And let me just give you some numbers as you're watching this video here. We're seeing all different types of weapons. If you're listening, less than 1 second per attack here. Many of these videos, some of these videos we've shown you on this program, because these are excerpts from longer videos. I just want to give you the numbers from Hezbollah here. On the 200-day, they marked 200 days by saying that they had carried out 650 attacks, 186 against settlements, 1,000 against border sites, 55 against rear bases, as far as 23 kilometers deep into Israel, 51 targets targeting of aerial assets. Those are the drone attacks that we've been reporting on that have downed Israeli drones, and 70 attacks on Israeli bases. The weapons used: 352 artillery operations. This is just the number of operations, not the number of munitions fired. So 352 artillery ops. Hezbollah has 40 multiple rocket launchers that have 40 rockets per system. And so when they say 352 artillery ops, they mean just the operation, not the number of rockets fired during that. There's 750 rocket operations, 77 sniper operations, 50 air defense operations, 55 drone attacks, and 550 anti-tank guided missile strikes. And those are Kornet anti-tank missiles and the Almas top attack anti-tank missile that we have been detailing over these past few months. That is the first view in battle that we have seen of that top attack anti-tank weapon. And Israeli analysts on Israeli TV, defense analysts, were saying that they believe that Hezbollah has used only 3% of their munitions. But if 3% of 750 rocket attacks would be 25,000 rockets, and we know that Hezbollah has at least 150,000 in their arsenal, according to the Israelis. So it's a lot smaller than 3% of their munitions. This war in the north has been carefully calibrated between the two sides to prevent wider escalation, but Hezbollah has constantly escalated these attacks, along with replying to any Israeli attacks and responding to the genocide in Gaza. And so the ability to end the war in Gaza for Israel includes ending the war in the north, where Israel has 250,000 citizens evacuated from 43 settlements that are abandoned, villages and kibbutz in the north that are abandoned. There's a 5-kilometer buffer zone inside Israel in the north. There's also one in the south. The buffer zones are for the first time inside Israel, not inside Israeli occupied territory, as Israeli strategy over the years has had it. And we're seeing the settlement units in the north destroyed in a way that we haven't seen before, and people haven't seen. And new strategic bind that Israel is in is that these buffer zones, it's unclear how these buffer zones will be returned to Israel, how these villagers will end up going back home without a comprehensive diplomatic solution, which is something that the Israelis don't appear able to do. We just saw the last one there. That was the Hermes 900 drone falling from the sky. Okay, let's look at number 16 here tomorrow, because this is in the Metula settlement. You can see Hezbollah tracking here an Israeli armored convoy. This is a Merkava tank that's going to be hit by a Kornet anti-tank missile. Again, you can see this is a night operation. And the Kornet, you can see it flying through the air there. And we're watching it come up upon the tank, and it's another tank hit. And Hezbollah, this is the 93rd armored vehicle that Hezbollah has claimed throughout this war, in this 200 days. A clear hit on that Israeli Merkava tank in the Metula settlement there. And let's look at number 17. This is a convoy ambush here. This is a convoy ambush in the Sheba Farms area, the occupied Sheba Farms area. And this is a complex attack that we are watching. Again, the surveillance in the north is significant as well. They're watching the patterns of these armored vehicles over the course of days. And then hitting them when they're in this convoy. This convoy is hit at the front of the convoy and at the back of the convoy, trapping the convoy. You can see it here. The first strike will hit. You can see the two red circles surrounding the targets, and you can see the anti-tank missile come flying into the screen there and hits the first vehicle in this 3-vehicle convoy. You can see it's a direct hit on that vehicle. The Kornet anti-tank missile is a very precise weapon, so they tend to hit. As we clearly see in this case, the front vehicle is hit, and the back vehicle is going to be targeted in a moment here. The middle vehicle turns off its lights, and this is something that harkens back to the 2006 war, when Israeli mechanized convoys invading Lebanon were attacked, particularly in Wadi Hajar. And the beginning of the convoy was attacked, and the back of the convoy was attacked, trapping the convoy, trapping the middle part of the convoy. Here we don't see a follow-up on the rest of the convoy, but these kind of attacks are just harbingers of what an open war between Israel and Hezbollah would look like. And Hezbollah is carefully escalating. They don't take out the entire convoy here. And this is what we're seeing here is flares being fired by Israeli drones, presumably, in order to try to throw off the anti-tank missiles that would be fired. It's kind of a cover for their vehicles, but there was no follow-up on this. They just hit the front and the back of this convoy. The Israelis admitted 1 casualty in that operation. Okay, let's look at number 18 here tomorrow. This is an Almas anti-tank top attack anti-tank missile, and this attack is interesting because this is multiple Almas anti-tank weapons. So you can see that Hezbollah shows it being launched here, and this is another footage here from the side that shows the trajectory of this weapon. It's fired, it can travel up in the air, and then it's controlled from a separate location and can be then, the top attack is called that because it can be then directed back down towards the ground. It can hit concealed targets. And this was an attack on Al-Manara settlement, an abandoned settlement in the north. And it was multiple Almas anti-tank weapon attacks here, and we're seeing drone footage here. So this is the first time we've seen this drone footage used in the attack. The Almas and the Kornet, they don't set off the air raid alarms in Israel. They don't set off the air defense systems in Israel. The Israeli Iron Dome system doesn't work against these weapons. And so we have seen these attacks happen. This one in Al-Manara settlement, right after people reported that there was no air raid sirens on this, but the Israelis did say that they downed this drone. One of the drones that came over was downed. These are complex attacks. We saw one on the show last week using drones and anti-tank missiles at the same time, using attack drones, suicide drones. And this attack was multiple Almas anti-tank weapons and also a rocket barrage as well. So we're starting to see complex attacks. And these attacks are something that Israel, an open war with Hezbollah is something that Israel cannot win. We've seen them operate in the Gaza Strip, a place that's besieged and builds their own weapons, unable to defeat the resistance in Gaza. And it's even worse situation for Hezbollah, which is many years ahead of the Palestinian resistance in building this capacity. And also Hezbollah has the ability through a land corridor to import weaponry, weaponry that we haven't seen yet. These Almas, we hadn't seen this Almas top attack anti-tank missile before this conflict used in battle. You can see we're watching here for people watching at home. You can watch that video. The video is from the missile. We watched the first person view of that missile strike. And I want to just bring one more quick one in here tomorrow. Let's do number 20. This is Ansar Allah, the Yemeni armed forces managed to down another American US Air Force Reaper, MQ-9 Reaper drone, $30 million drone, at least $30 million drone. Here being downed by a surface-to-air missile by Ansar Allah, the Yemeni armed forces, as part of the battle in the Red Sea. And just to give you, they also gave their 200-day status update, and they indicated that the Yemeni armed forces have carried out 120 operations, 100 of them naval operations, and 18 of them against Israel. They've also targeted they target Eilat as well. And you can see clearly here this MQ-9 Reaper drone fall out of the sky. They show us the parts of here. We're looking at the parts of this of the Reaper, which the United States Air Force admitted these are known Reaper parts, and the United States Air Force said that there was a USAF MQ-9 drone crashed in in Yemen, and they're investigating. So this was downed over Sada in Yemen. So drones every week, the resistance is able to get. This is an American drone. We've seen Hezbollah getting Israeli drones multiple times throughout the course of this battle. You're seeing here footage from Ansar Allah that shows the destroyed Reaper drone. This is the third confirmed Reaper drone that has been downed since November in the battle in the Red Sea and Israel's southern front that Ansar Allah has carried out, asking for the genocide, demanding the genocide end, and carrying on these attacks until that happens. So the discussion, maybe we'll have more in the discussion about it, but the prisoner exchange negotiations, the ceasefire negotiations, aren't just with Gaza. There needs to be a comprehensive solution to this for Israel that just doesn't seem, Israel doesn't seem capable right now of carrying out the type of diplomatic, comprehensive diplomatic agreement that would get a prisoner exchange, that would get the war in the north to end, and allow their settlements to be rebuilt in the north from their perspective. Also the same in the south. And so when we get all of this news about Israeli proposals, this not even the beginning of dealing with this conflict. diplomatically. So that is the resistance report. Those are videos all from the last week since you last saw us in Gaza, in Lebanon, and also in Yemen.
Fantastic roundup yet again, Jon. Thank you so much. There are a few things that maybe we could talk about. I want to get to some of the student intifada stuff in a few minutes, but what are your thoughts, Jon, on these accelerating threats of a Rafah invasion? What do you make of the these excuses that the Israelis are making, that they're doing everything they can to prevent civilian casualties? The U.S. is saying that well, we can't do anything, the invasion is imminent. What do we make of what's happening there?
Yeah, and Blinken called it an extraordinarily, he said it twice, generous offer,
Yeah.
The latest prisoner exchange proposal. I think we've been following the Rafah invasion. I've said it week after week. We will see that the buildup for that, if the invasion is intended to be the same as it was in other places in Gaza, we will see the buildup of those troops that we're not seeing right now. Rafah is a complicated operation for the Israelis compared to other places. Rafah is along the border with Egypt, which creates a situation for Israel. Rafah is populated, of course, with not only the population of Rafah, but at least 1 million other Palestinians that have fled from other areas.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a systematic removal of the civilians from the Rafah area, which is something the Americans said has to happen. Although the Secretary of Defense yesterday said at that House Armed Services Committee, he said, hopefully
Right.
the civilians will be removed before that operation. So I think at this point they're using Rafah as a point of leverage in these negotiations, because they've lost the war. They haven't achieved any of the objectives that they've said. If Netanyahu makes an agreement without any of those objectives met, it's the end of his career. It's the end of the government.
Well, Smotrich said it would be the end of the state itself if they, quote, let Sinwar win. I mean, they know, they can see the writing on the wall that they've lost.
Yeah, they're
this
calling
war.
it an existential fight.
Yeah.
Calling it an existential fight when you're clearly losing the war just seems like such a bold claim by the Israelis, but maybe it is. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of these things can't really be put back. The toothpaste can't be put back in the tube on this. This is the collapse of Zionism happening. Even just the Ali segment, those lies are all premised on the idea that their army was completely absent for an entire day, that their army can't defend their populations. I mean, when those stories first started, when they started lying about those stories, it was, even for a cynic, it was surprising that was the angle that they wanted to take, that their army was completely helpless. All of those individual superhero stories are all lies that cover over the fact that their army was completely absent. And so I don't know why Israel would want to say this is an existential struggle, but they're clearly losing the war. Their own population knows they're losing the war. I don't think there's going to be any serious military analyst in the years to come that will say anything other than that either. Yeah. So if they want it to be an existential war, they're losing that war. I think the writing's on the wall.
If I can just add regarding Rafah, I mean, just to say that the mood from people that were in touch with the Rafah is really one of terror.
Yeah.
I mean, people feel that it's even the threat of it, the thought of it is torture. People who are in Rafah have said to me it's psychological warfare. People don't know what to do. Some people, more people are trying to get to Egypt, which of course may be one of Israel's goals. others are trying to get to Deir al-Balah or back to Khan Yunis. I mean, people really don't know where to go. And in terms of any so-called preparations by Israel, they've bragged about procuring tents, as if tents is going to be any, when all the infrastructure is destroyed, water, sanitation, food, and they're still not letting food in. And then we learned this week that the World Central Kitchen, which we, of course, have covered extensively here, is resuming its operations in Gaza, even as Israel continues to prevent UNRWA from operating and, prevent aid from coming in anything like the quantities that are needed, is very worrying, particularly since, as the New York Times reported, World Central Kitchen is setting up operations in Al-Mawasi, which is this tiny coastal village which Israel claims is where 1.5 million people are going to go, and that's absolutely ridiculous. So I do worry that it's not that they're going to do a PR op, a public relations operation. Oh, we prepared, we made humanitarian provisions and then just go in and do it anyway. But, Jon, at this point, as you said, the reason you've said to us that, well, or at least if I'm not misinterpreting what you've said, it would take a lot of buildup, it would take a lot of preparation that is not necessarily in place now in terms of mobilizing forces and so on. But if, as you've said, their goal is just destruction and murder and not actually to make any military achievements, if you've pointed out, they don't talk about the tunnels anymore. They don't talk about going into the tunnels or destroying the tunnels. They've given up on any actual military goal. Then it really might just be destroy everything. And then, as we've been on live, and also the other thing over the last few days is that there's been some optimism, including in Gaza. People have say to me, "Oh, is it real? Are the negotiations going to reach a ceasefire?" And then now the headline today in Haaretz is optimism wanes over Israel-Hamas deal. And I think it's the same pattern. Netanyahu will go along with the negotiations, and then just at the moment when it looks like the optimism rises, he pulls the rug from under the negotiators, or he refuses, and it's back to square one, because the negotiations are a charade that allows the war to this goalless war, other than genocide, to continue. And for Netanyahu, everybody knows that any kind of deal, even a temporary deal, which Hamas, of course, and the resistance won't accept, but even if they would, that would be a disaster for Netanyahu, because even a temporary truce would probably provide enough political space in Israel for the political infighting or the protests to put real pressure on Netanyahu that might topple him. So I think his one option is the war, and it's up to the rest of us to keep up the pressure from outside. And it's not very hopeful, but what is hopeful is one of my fears was that after this went on for long enough, the world would go back to business as usual and forget about Gaza, and it would become a minor story on the back pages. And that hasn't happened. And outrage and pressure and anger is growing. And right now it's taking the form of the student uprising, primarily in the United States, but around the world. We've seen protests in almost every country, but that has to keep up.
It does. It does. Well, do we want to transition to talking for a few minutes about the student uprisings? As I mentioned in the news report at the top of the show, violent crackdowns by the New York Police Department against students, not just at Columbia, but at City College of New York. We also saw a mob of violent Israel supporters in California at the campus of UCLA. Shoot fireworks and pepper spray into the encampment. They started throwing things around, beating people up. And of course, I saw a report that that private campus security actually ran away and barricaded themselves in a nearby building. And of course, then, the CNN says that there were violent clashes. Right. The BBC earlier today said something like, a violent situation at a pro-Palestinian protest, implying that it was the people, protesting and in the encampments against the genocide who were being violent, when it was, of course, the other way around. So we're seeing a very coordinated, of course, not surprising, corporate military attack on students exercising their right to protest against complicity in a genocide, participation in a genocide.
And it's the exact same deceptive media tactics that are used against Palestinians. Passive
That's exactly
voice
it, right.
in the headlines,
Yeah.
Implying strongly implying the opposite of what actually
Right.
happened in real
Right.
life. The students were attacked by Zionist gangs.
Right.
And
And
in
they're
at
trying to imply
Northeast,
the opposite.
That's right.
and at Northeastern University, which is in Boston, which by the way, a few years ago, Nora, of course, you'll remember this. You reported on it. I think Northeastern was the first university in the United States to outright ban students for justice in Palestine.
They had
And
to
now,
sue. Yeah, exactly.
so at Northeastern, they used the pretext that someone had shouted "Kill the Jews"
Right.
in order to send in the police and beat up the students and arrest people. But the person who shouted "Kill the Jews" was someone from a pro-Israel extremist counter demonstration who was doing it as a provocation, and they just used that as the pretext. And I mean,
And the university still has not retracted its
No.
claim that it was that it was Palestine solidarity activists.
well, no, I think they actually did. I saw a statement from the
Oh.
university that said, well, it doesn't matter. That language is unacceptable on our
Right.
campus. But I mean, it's just Orwellian. But I think that what are we seeing here? What are we seeing here? I
Yeah.
mean, I went to college in the late 80s, early 90s in the United States on a campus where there were protests all the time. At that time, there were encampments over apartheid South Africa, US intervention in Central America. There were occupations of the main building. There were protests against the Reserve Officer Training Corps, the military recruitment on campus. There were protests against CIA recruitment on campus. I can't recall it. I took part in protests. I took part in unauthorized protests. Usually you had to get like a permit to hand out flyers and so on. And this was during the first Intifada. And there's no. I remember that our university gave an honorary doctorate to President Bush, the first one, the elder, and there were protests about that. This was around the time of the Iraq War. And on no occasion did the university call the police.
Yeah.
On no occasion were students arrested. This same university immediately when an encampment went up, I haven't seen violence at my alma mater yet, but they immediately threatened the students with arrest, the dean of students. That never happened in my time. And of course, I'm just giving that as one example that what we're seeing is something quite extraordinary. And I think it represents a complete breakdown of the pretense of the liberal order. What we're seeing is the collapse of the pretense of liberal democracy that has already affected our politics, where we're censored on all these platforms, where it doesn't matter who you vote for, you get the same thing, where the intelligence services run massive propaganda and disinformation campaigns like Russiagate and all this stuff has now spread to the universities, where the pretense that these were havens of free speech and academic freedom was always a lie. 10 years ago, Stephen Salaita was fired by the University of Illinois in a famous case for speaking out against the war in Gaza then. But, now it's on a level where it's like they're sending, the universities are calling the cops and the state troopers on their own students, on their own faculty. And we're seeing this all over the country at Washington University in St. Louis, last week at UT Austin in Texas, at UCLA. It is just, they're sending in the stormtroopers. Yeah. And what is left of even the pretense of democracy and an open society? It's just astonishing to me.
It is
Colombia wants the police to stay for 2 weeks. They want
after graduation.
So it's like Colombia is now under military occupation, essentially on behalf of Israel. I've seen videos today of checkpoints set up at the NYPD around campus, and students aren't allowed to go. Aren't allowed to cross areas. The university imposed restrictions where you're only allowed to enter certain areas if you live there. It's just
with an approved list of credentialed media outlets that can cross the checkpoint, and of course they excluded independent journalists. They excluded even their own student-run WKCR radio station. Like the students who run the radio station on campus couldn't access their studio last night without I think it was like 2 or 3 hours of trying to haggle with the police to
And by the way, can I say, Nora, I think this is important to make this connection, that a few hours before the brutal attack by the NYPD, invited by Minouche Shafik, the president of Colombia, against her own students, President Biden issued a statement attacking them and smearing them and condemning them as anti-Semites. So the way I see it, she got the green light from the White House to attack these students.
Yeah.
And you just have to think, given that Biden needs young people to vote, are they, aside from the morality and cruelty and criminality of what they're doing, the stupidity of it, do they think this is going to turn the Biden,
win the hearts and minds of young people?
It's like the old saying, the beatings will continue until morale improves. It's just astonishing.
Speaking of the beatings, there's the cops also were praised last night on CNN for their restraint and their care, not hurting any students. Meanwhile, students were uploading videos.
Just like the Israeli army is the most moral army in the world, who go to great lengths to protect civilians. The NYPD is the most moral and just moral.
Yes, we have a video that here we go. So this is Columbia University student who was pushed down the stairs, became unconscious and was denied access to medical care. And as I said in the report, there are many students who had to be driven or to the emergency room afterwards by because of these beatings by cops who apparently took great care and exercised restraint.
And of course, at St. Louis University, people may have seen the video in St. Louis. I think it was at Washington University. No, it was at SIEU, Southern Illinois.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think, I just want to make sure I get the name of the university right. It was, or I think it was at the reports I'm seeing say Yeah, he is a professor of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and he was at Washington University in St. Louis. They're close to each other, just across the Mississippi River from each other. And Steve Tamari is a Palestinian-American professor, and he was beaten by the police and put in hospital. He was severely injured. And Steve Tamari is someone we know. He's a kind, gentle man, and faculty being brutalized. Nora, I just want to, if I may, before I want to remember this. After a discussion last week when we mentioned the shootings, the massacre of 4 students at Kent State University in on May 4th, 1970, one of our viewers, Jamila, wrote to me, and she pointed out that we had not mentioned, and I'm going to drop this in the chat. I'd like Tamara to put it up. The shootings, the massacre at Jackson State University in Mississippi. And this happened on May 15th, 1970, when the police opened fire shortly after midnight on students and passers-by in a protest of the U.S. invasion of Cambodia during the Vietnam War at Jackson State College, as it was then. It's called Jackson State University now. And what we're showing on the screen is from the Zinn Education Project. And a number of students were injured and 2 were killed, Philip Gibbs and James Earl Green. And I think many have noted quite rightly that Jackson State is and was a historically Black university. These 2 students are Black. And so these killings are not as well known as the killings at Kent State. And to my shame, I didn't know about them because of, I think, that very fact that they have been ignored historically. So I really want to thank Jamila for educating me about that. And it's very important to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's extraordinary how shallow the vision of history is for these administrators and these politicians, these lawmakers who are, throwing everything they can at trying to suppress this growing militant student movement, which is calling for an end to the U.S. complicity in genocide. They don't learn their history. I mean, Columbia, it's so ironic and kind of perfect that Columbia itself, which touts, as you said, like this bastion of free thought and progressive thinking and diversity, equity, inclusion, representation, all of this, they have a class on how the university failed its students during the 1968 uprising on campus.
It was April 30th, 1968. I mean, they called the police on the exact same day.
On the exact same building, Hamilton Hall, which protesters this week renamed Hinds Hall.
There's a viewer here who says
incredible.
that Columbia's website still has pages up celebrating the spirit of '68 and regretting that they called the stormtroopers in.
Yeah, regretting. And they don't. It's not that they even wish to learn. This is how neoliberal universities operate. This is who they truly are. It's that old adage: you scratch a liberal, you find a fascist. You scratch a liberal institution, you find a fascist institution.
It's the same about all these people who cry about the Holocaust and never again while doing it again.
Absolutely.
They're crying and weeping, oh, never again, while arming
sending in the stormtroopers
in an actual genocide.
Yeah.
And it's hard, it's hard to hold it together in this world we're living in. But I think that what keeps the only thing that keeps me together is seeing this energy and this protest and this community and the small and large, the community we have here, the support we have from all the people who read and watch and share the work of our writers like Donya Abu Sitta, who we had the great honor and fortune to talk to here earlier. And that's what's going to get us through this is we have to strengthen those communities and that solidarity at every level. And I think that's a good thought to have on May Day.
I completely agree. Absolutely. All right. Well, before we wrap up, Asa, let's go to some of the comments and questions.
Yeah, lots today, as always. Let's do a rundown of some of the places around the world viewers were watching from. Uruguay, Sligo Island. We have a regular viewer from there. Thank you. Switzerland. Hello from Bryn Mawr. Now, there's a Bryn Mawr in Chicago and a Bryn Mawr in South Wales, and this one isn't specified.
And there's a Bryn Mawr in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, the
And
university.
there's a Bryn Mawr College. So
Okay,
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, Bryn Mawr, as I've told our colleague Maureen in the past, Bryn Mawr is Welsh for big hill. So, you know, clearly
Oh, I didn't
Welsh.
know that.
Yeah, it wasn't only English settlers settling North America. There we go. Albany, New York. Hello from Germany, the wrong side of history. Thank you. Peace from Italy. Salam alaikum from Pakistan.
Alaikum salam, Pakistan.
Alaikum salam. London, UK. Lisbon, Portugal. Mayday greetings from the Suffolk coast. Thank you. Hello from India. Salam from Cairo, and Shamai from Cymru. Hello from Wales. Thank you, everybody. Let's see. We had a lot of support for our guests. We had there was a lot of feedback, positive feedback, and obviously discussed on about the nature of the content in Ali's segment. This viewer says, well done, EI, for exposing the lies. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ali, for your clarity and thoroughness. And we had a couple of comments along these lines towards genuine sexual assault victims. This is very insulting. How women to be believed when lies like this are spread. Thank you for that, Molly. And this viewer made the comment that, if you remember, it was just like John Ware's Panorama when Jeremy Corbyn was Labour's leader. The lies are so blatant. Yeah, as a point we've made in the past, it's a very similar kind of big lie with very emotional and very disturbing claims being made, and these are even more disturbing, right? You know.
Can I speak on behalf of Tamara for a second? Of course, she's welcome to come and speak for herself. But a point Tamara made, which I think is very important, is that the Sheryl Sandberg film would have been a very different film, but for the debunking that we and other independent media have done over the last few months. In other words, as I pointed out, she had to leave out a lot of the lies because they'd already been debunked. So they really had to limit it. And that's exactly, Asa, like the recent Panorama program that you had preemptively reported on that was supposedly going to expose all these, Hamas sympathizers in the UK. And you went on the attack and sort of pre-bunked, is that a word? The Panorama program. So when the BBC came out with it, it was really very, very limited. There were very few things they were prepared to say.
Well, that was a second Panorama program on the issue of the 7th of October, and it seemed like it was going to be a lot about making more allegations of mass rape, and in the end, it didn't really. It kind of implied that there was some stuff. Small points made about it in passing, and I think similarly to that, Ali, you can definitely, the whole team, but especially yourself, you can definitely take credit for. There's no doubt that the Sheryl Sandberg's film would have been very different without the reporting you've been doing on this. So that's important to note, I think, and as well as our friends at Mondo Voice and Greystone for sure. Okay, let's see what else we have here. We have some nice comments about Tamara. All hail Tamara. Thank you, Nora and Tamara. We had like the chat went absolutely wild for Donya. Stay strong, Donya. The world is with you. Love to you from South Carolina. Respect and solidarity to you from Uruguay. And a friend of the show, Roger Waters, says, Donya, we hear you. Love Roger Waters. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Donya, etc. There was loads. There are absolutely loads. So, yeah, can't go through all of them. And as always, everybody enjoyed the Resistance Hour. We always every week we have great comments like this.
Nicknames.
About especially when John comes on, so that's great. And Mary says, "I love how this was when you showed the segment about the PFLP. Love how John respects what the fighters respect and prioritize what they prioritize. Thank you so much, EO, for everything you do for all to center Palestinian voices. Thank you to everybody who wrote in."
Absolutely. And finally, let's take a quick look at the front page, remind people of the incredible stories that we've published over the past few days, especially by our contributors in Gaza. And of course, like we always say, sign up for our email list up at the top. Ali, do you want to talk about some of the features?
Yeah, we have that right at the top there on the banner is a great piece by our colleague Maureen Murphy. And Maureen does really thoughtful analysis and background. I mean, I learn so much from reading Maureen's pieces. And here she looks at how really one of the main priorities in all the US maneuvering is to really to protect Israel's impunity at any cost. And I think she really helped me to understand that. So I highly recommend that. And then if we look back at the front page, we have also, I have to make my screen bigger because I don't have my, there we go. And as you can see, we have, again, front and center features from our writers in Gaza who continue to do extraordinary work, just like Donya, when they're living in the most horrifying conditions. And we had, the news about the murder of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜𝐿 really hit us all very hard. And so there's that lovely piece from Hind Ghazi al-Farra. And we had another piece early in the week. I don't know if it's still on the front page. If we scroll down, it might still be there. But it is on the site by, there it is, Razan Abu Salim at the bottom, which is also a wonderful tribute to Rifat and his daughter. And as Donya said, Donya is one of his students, one of the thousands of people in Gaza who he mentored, educated, supported, cared for, and as you can see, that even now, after so much, Rifat still continues to inspire and sustain people in Gaza, as he does us and many people around the world. So that was really tough news this week.
Yeah, it's unspeakable. All right. Well, I think that will do it for us. Please like and subscribe, share, talk about our features and our posts and our news reports. Go to our YouTube channel, hit subscribe so you can get notified on the next podcast that we do and live stream. And
And let me just point out, I mean, a lot of people know this, but, we do this whole long live stream. It goes on for a few hours. It's like a Star Wars movie every week or a Lord of the Rings, and I'm amazed that people care, and we appreciate that. But then what we do is we do break it up into different segments and put those individual videos on the YouTube channel. So if you want to share, and actually, like, for example, John's analysis will probably be broken up into, a video about Yemen, a video about Lebanon, a video about Gaza, and those are, easy to share, to spread that information. We'll definitely make a segment about the piece I did debunking the Sheryl Sandberg film, the news brief that Nora did. So I just want to point that out, because those are things that you can share as well on the social media. It's a lot easier than sharing a 2 3/4 or 3 hour live stream. So just to remind you of that, please do help us get this information to as many people as possible.
Absolutely. As always, Tamara Nassar, thank you so much for your perfection in the production and direction of this episode. Jon, Asa, Ali, everyone at EI, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.